small town, typical of southern towns.
Me and my wife run all over town. Everywhere we go, the people would turn us down, Lord, and the bridge rolls down.
My father was a railway worker, but they had a system on the railroad. But the boilermaker had to be a white man, and so the white man could have a helper. And my father used to do all of this work. The white man was getting the money, and the white man stayed drunk about all the time. In later years, the whites in the community used to always tell me that I should be like my father, that he was a good man, and that he was a hard worker, and he never gave any trouble.
Oh, man, trouble, leave me alone. Go find you someone else to ignore. I live my life down you see now. Oh, man, trouble.
I lived out in the rural area of Union County, and when they talked about Rob Williams, we were really young children, and we had mixed feelings about who this man was. Of course, I had a fear for him and for what it might do for the community, because I lived in a predominantly white community out in the country, and the men and women talked very openly about how they felt, what they thought this strange person was doing to upset the normalcy of our community.
Mr. Boss Man, tell me what I've done. How come you lock me away from the light?
Klan tried to make a black woman dance on the street, calling it gunpoint. Otherwise, they make somewhat of a jig. It's like a puppet, you know, when you're dangling a puppet on a string. You're completely reduced then to nothing. And that's one thing that helped set that first thing off in Monroe in '57. That's what set off the God. Then we started to really getting organized and setting up and digging foxholes, and we started getting ammunition.
Rob had these guns, high-powered rifles. You know, all we had was 22s and 410 shotguns hunting, you know, and got a chance to, you know, to use the high-powered weapons and become proficient with them. And he taught us a little, what do you call it, karate or self-defense things, you know. We drilled with him and trained with him.
Much of our guard was young. We had guys that were 16 years old, 15 and 16, we had some too in the 40s and 50s, but a good many of them were the very young high school students and dropouts.
We were never looking for trouble. You know, as long as you're peaceful, we're peaceful. But if you become violent, we have to become violent, you know. We weren't attacking anybody or fighting against anybody, just protecting ourselves, you know.
Had 200 armed, plus we had others who would have been on call. About 500 or 600 guns, because some people had guns who weren't directly participating, but they were on call if we needed them.
I guess he weighed, like about maybe 220 for the time, but that was pretty big. And he was strong now. Rob could have handled himself now, I'm going to tell you. You know, he could have handled himself.
That Rob, he carries his gun right on his side, go right downtown, go everywhere Rob went, he carries 45 right on. Now, where he'd use it now, I don't know, but I guess people felt the same way like I felt. They didn't know, so they didn't bother Rob.
But they didn't want us to get the idea. They wanted us also to feel inferior, less than men, because they know that men will stand up and fight, that men will fight for their rights and for their families and for their homes, in defense of their homes. but we were supposed to be less than men. The next thing is that what is not commonly known is that the deacons of self-defense from Monroe, Louisiana, and also that all of the radical groups, even SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, the Panthers, they all got their inspiration from Monroe. That's documented in my FBI files. But nobody wanted to say this. They didn't want to give us credit for this type of thing. The next thing is that you have the situation of other groups that's resorted to some form of violence, lost people. It's like a situation in Chicago where they broke into the house with the Panthers sleeping and they just wiped out a number of them. But we never lost anybody. That some of our people shot other people and a policeman claimed he was shot, but we didn't lose not a single person. So this was our Mount Vernon. Now what do I mean by Mount Vernon? As a child, we learned in school that George Washington led a ragtag army against the greatest army in the world, the British Army, an empire that the sun never set on his flag. So he led this ragtag army. He overcame the oppression of the British throne. He became president of the United States. Then he went home to Mount Vernon and lived out the rest of his life as a peaceful country farmer gentleman. That was the Mount Vernon that they teach in school, especially to white children, that you might resist tyranny and you might still survive. But for us, we had no Mount Vernon. They wanted to show us, if you resist white tyranny, white oppression, you will die like other people. Can you imagine an 8-year-old child traveling with his mother, and he says, "Mother, that street, that school is Malcolm X, or that's the Harry T. Moore, or that's the Martin Luther King High School. Mother, what happened to them? What happened to Reverend King, this great man of peace who loved his people?" And she got to tell him, "Son, he was murdered." Mother, why was he murdered? He was murdered because he loved justice. He wanted justice for his people. Well, Malcolm X, what happened, Mother? Same thing. Harry T. Moore, he was murdered because he wanted justice for his people. And there's a long list of that. Now, can you imagine a child, a young boy, when you tell him that? What is it? What is the psychological impact in his head? Oh, if I follow that course, I must be ready for suicide. That course is death. There's no Mount Vernon for me. And so this is why our Mount Vernon, they don't want the people to know about it. And so this is why a man like the President of the United States, who would be against civil rights, would also sign for a Martin Luther King holiday. I think a Martin Luther King holiday is all right, and I'm for it. But I don't jump up and shout because we got it, because I know the meaning behind it. The meaning is that once a year, every black child in America is reminded that they shot this great man down like a dog on the streets of Memphis.
The Katherine Massey Book Club, Context of White Supremacy. The worthless Negro from Virginia, Gus T. Renegade, in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information on the System of White Supremacy. Today's date, Friday, July 17, 2026. So I have been told. This is our second installment on the memoirs of Robert and Mabel Williams. So glad that we have an opportunity to study. Hey, we are the biography kings, so elated to be reading this pair of autobiographies. We're picking up on chapter 3, just got started last week, so hopefully folks are really settling in for great studying. The audio that we heard at the beginning, a little bit from the documentary Negroes with Guns, that is Robert Williams' previous autobiography, where he talks about his time growing up in Monroe and how the white people wanted him to be like his dad. Importantly, he also talks about the racist abuse of black females and wanting them to dance in the street. It parallels exactly what we heard last week, all the sexual abuse and what have you in Monroe. And then the transition. You see what I did there? I got him talking about his FBI files and what he said about all of their armed self-defense, and saying, hey, you got Dr. King, who was killed, and Minister Malcolm X, who was killed, and Dr. Harry T. Moore, his wife, who was killed, bombed on Christmas Day. If you're a black person, you fight against racism, you'll be killed. Dr. Welsing talked about that too. And he said, hey, we were black, we fought against racism, and we survived. That's why, another reason why they do not want us to be known, and the influence that we had. He talked about his FBI files, and then he talked about Dr. King's assassination in Memphis. We just talked about all of that this week. Yes. Lauterbach, race soldier suspect. Yes. ME338R. They got informants in North Carolina as well. You heard Robert F. talk about his FBI file. I've seen some of that. I'm sure they had all kinds of informants around him as well. With that, last thing, the song playing in the background, that is Richard M. Jones, Trouble in Mind. Do you remember last week, Robert F. was talking about he saw a man, he thought he was white, but then he got up on him and said, oh, this is a light-skinned black male who was drinking, said he had drank too much from the bitter cup of life. That was how he described it. And he said he was singing that song, Trouble in Mind, by Richard M. Jones. Apparently this is like a really famous blues hit from about 100 years ago. But this was really prominent. I guess lots of people sung this song, but sounds like about what I would expect a privileged black male to be singing in what they call the nadir, early 20th century USA white supremacy racism. With that, we will get to it. Katherine Massey Book Club, Context of White Supremacy, the memoirs of Robert and Mabel Williams.
Bring out, B. Tanner. Back door someday.
Chapter 3. Growing Up to the Sounds of Newtown. Through the weeks, when nights were as quiet as a lonely desert, I would lie in bed and listen to the after-midnight freight trains rumbling through the eastern edge of Newtown. The huge steam engines always seemed to leave lonely echoes that lingered in their wake as they faded into the distance. The train whistles made me restless. I wondered what distant cities they were destined for and why destitute men called hobos rode them. Most always they were racked with hunger, sooty and ragged men in quest of a better promise. Sometimes the hobos detrained in Monroe to beg for leftover food or just cold bread. Despite the fact that they never engaged in violence against the townspeople, their presence aroused much fear. My father worked the night shift, and this fact engendered a special fear in my mother. When they came to our house, begging in the night, her Christian tenants would not permit her to turn them away. She would ask them to stand back from the door as she passed food out to the floor of the porch. For some reason, night trains were a romantic part of community life. One engineer became a legend in his time. We never knew his name, but the whole community knew when he was passing through. He was such a master of the train whistle that he would play the tune of the song, "Happy Days Are Here Again," as he passed through. He was known by all as Happy Day. Everybody liked to hear him come roaring through the town with his whistle going. On Friday and Saturday nights, I could lie awake and listen to distant laughter and music. Contrary to the complaints of the Christian neighbors that these disruptive bawlers should be driven from among decent people, I burned with a desire to be in their number. They seemed to enjoy life immensely. Miss Polk's house served as a way station for desperate and sometimes highly talented musician wanderers. Though Newtown claimed some of the most prosperous black citizens, as far as city facilities went, we were the scorned and neglected by the city fathers. The army of WPA workers had not yet reached our ghetto with their construction of sewer lines. Outhouses constituted a central part of the black homestead. Mrs. Polk's house was a block away across a vacant lot. This Saturday night, true to routine, Miss Polk's joint was jumping. Barrel house music engulfed the neighborhood like a dense fog. I stole out of bed and slipped out of the house as often it was necessary to do on a mission to the outhouse. I could hear the piano, hot and spicy, rolling out the blues. A washboard, a harmonica, and a guitar complemented the piano and at times seemed to challenge its blue notes. The down-home blues drew me like a magnet. I soon found myself standing beside Miss Siss's house. I was standing in a crowd peering into her window. The house was jam-packed. The ones outside could not get inside. The aroma of frying fish drifted out of the kitchen window and stoked the appetites of all who stood or passed. A big, dark man was at the piano. His face was a mass of perspiration. He closed his eyes and pounded the keys of the piano as if all the adversities of his life were being transferred through his fingers. Occasionally he would reach for a glass on top of the piano and drink a liquid so white and colorless that it was almost invisible. It was what was called stump liquor or white lightning. A sweating, thin brown man played his guitar so melodiously that it seemed to sing a crying and tortured lyric. The washboard man was so short that I could barely see him. His skin was lighter than the others, and he wore overalls that looked too big for his underdeveloped body. Miss Siss's house was really jumping. The painted women with their cheap cosmetics danced more with their bodies than with their feet. The women clung to their men as if they may have been Siamese twins. The dancers rolled their stomachs together and rocked from side to side. Occasionally, some happy soul would bellow, "Mercy, mercy, mercy." An outsider looking in on these poor souls could easily be mistakenly led to believe that they had not a worry in the world. A drunken voice yelled from the crowd, "Let the good times roll, 'cause I'm laughing just to keep from crying." In my young innocence, I thought that Miss Siss's house was a happy house, a haven for black people that bordered on paradise. I was a child peeking into an adult world without realizing that this was the black man's momentary escape hatch to a sanctuary devoid of the white man's hatred that created a black man's hell. As if in a state of ecstasy, someone cried out, "Play it, Key! Play me some low-down, dirty blues." The house was rocking. It was really rocking. The old battered piano was taking an awful pounding. Key Francis's fingers were moving so fast that my eyes had to strain to keep up with them. As many nights as possible thereafter, I kept my rendezvous with what seemed to be a ritual. The high life at Miss Siss's house made me feel the impatience of a boy in a hurry to become a man. Chapter 4. The World Through the Radio. When I was 14, I became a newspaper delivery boy. Delivering the Charlotte news gave me status and some money to boot. Money had been scarce since the beginning of the Depression. 2 years before, I remember that my father had sent me in a quest of change for a $5 bill. I visited 4 stores and many homes in vain. All summer of 1941, I stayed busy with my paper route. Mr. Sam Roddy ran a store about halfway down the block from our house. Railroad men gathered there to exchange tales, play checkers, and commiserate with each other. There was very little recreation and entertainment for black people, and respected railroad men didn't dare be caught coming out of a barrel house. Some were very poor readers, and after I had finished my daily paper route, they often inveighed on me to read and explain the news to them. I liked the way they praised my smartness. After becoming a Sunday school dropout, I spent my Sundays listening to the big console radio. It was an Atwater Kent radio that had come to our house after the death of my Uncle Charlie. The radio had always brought him back to my memory. It was a sad memory. He was the first person I ever saw die. The extended family was called to his house one morning just after my father had come from work. My Aunt Cora was trying to make Uncle Charlie comfortable on his dying bed as I arrived there with my father. The others were huddling around a coal heater and talking in whispered voices. Uncle Charlie was weakly gasping for breath. I was standing at the foot of the bed, and his deep-set eyes seemed glued to me. In a short while, he gasped no more. Aunt Cora shook her head, closed his eyes with her hands, and pulled the sheet up over his head. His wife, Aunt Lizzie, let out a hurtful screech, then moaned, "Oh, Lord, you took Charlie. Take me too." When I played his radio that had fallen to us, oftentimes I felt grief well up within me. It was almost a ritual for me to listen to the New York Philharmonic over CBS every Sunday. In the environment I grew up in, it was incongruous for a young black boy to enjoy classical music. I liked all kinds of music, and though seeming strange, I exposed myself to whatever was available. The old Atwater Kent also had a shortwave band. Many were the late Saturday nights that I listened to the great big bands broadcasting from the Cotton Club in that faraway world of New York. I dreamed that someday I would see the promised land of Harlem in the Big Apple. And as the popular song explained, we all concurred in going to the Apple to live on Lenox Avenue. The blacks who had migrated to New York sometimes, mostly on holidays or when a relative died, returned on visits back home dressed like millionaires. They drove modern cars as flashy as the white folks did down home. Some even assimilated the New York broke. They showered the old folks with lavish gifts, accompanied by a pretentious air that provoked envy and fired the desire of emulation. It was Sunday, December 7, 1941. I was scanning the dial of the old Atwater Kent. The program was interrupted. The shocking announcement was, the Japanese have bombed Pearl Harbor. I ran to the kitchen where my mother was putting the finishing touches on our Sunday dinner. I shocked her with the news of Pearl Harbor. She wiped her face on her apron and sat down at the table. She shook her head and seemed dazed. She had seen the men come back from the First World War gassed and maimed forever. Before I was born, she had bought a large frame picture of colored soldiers in formation while one stood caressing his wife in front of a cottage fronted by a white picket fence. The black soldier was bidding his wife goodbye. A caption at the bottom stated, "The colored man is no slacker." My mother was thinking of her 3 sons. I picked up my papers early the next day. Everybody wanted a copy of the extra announcing the bombing of Pearl Harbor. The other shoe of war had been dropped. The premature announcement that Hitler had sent the world ablaze when he went into Poland was now a truism. The summer before, as we sat on our back porch, Grandma Pearl had looked at the long columns of ants crossing the yard and stated that this was God's warning of an impending war. The older people had a propensity of interpreting nature's latent messages. Some years earlier, we would go to a nearby street that descended down what we called Slick Hill in the heat of the summer night. We would romp and play under a streetlight. To avoid the intense heat of his bedroom, Mr. Bob Anthony used to sleep on a pallet on his front porch. In a loud voice, he would cry out that he could hear the cannon bombing all the way to Japan. He insisted that when he was coming down the railroad tracks one night, he met a little brown man who was a hobo. He said that the little brown man was a Jap, and that he had told him that war was coming between the U.S. and Japan. Along with the adults, we had laughed at him. Derisively, he had become known as Jap Anthony. He angrily stated that we could laugh at him all we wanted to, but to mark his word that we boys would someday have to fight the Japs. He looked Japanese, but seemed too big in stature to be one. He wore oversized overalls all the time, and the rupture that caused a big bulge between his legs added to his strange appearance. Chapter 5. War Fever Rises. War fever struck America. The nation shifted into high gear, and mobilization was the order of the day. Men were registered for the draft all over the nation. Volunteers were swarming into the service. Rationing books were fast becoming a part of our daily lives. My mother was spending more and more time in solitary prayer. She was praying for her sons. Because of the war, more opportunity for training and employment became available to our people. The National Youth Administration, NYA, had come full circle. The Roosevelt administration was pushing for the full utilization of the nation's potential. In the summer of 1942, at the age of 17, I joined the NYA. Black youths were supposed to be training on an equal basis with whites. I was assigned to a group that was to be trained as stonemasons. 8 of us teenagers were assigned to a rock quarry. We were told that we would have to dig stones, and later we would be taught to lay them while constructing an armory. We were laboring in a place called Baker's, which was 6 miles from Monroe. The white boys were sometimes digging and sometimes playing on another side of the quarry. The Carolina heat was exhausting. Because we were at a depth with very little air circulation, our clothes stayed wet from perspiration. There was great thirst and need for water. George Banner, one of the 8 of us, asked the white supervisor for a drink of water. He brought us a battered and dirty old bucket of water and gave us an old Coca-Cola bottle that still contained some residue of the oil that had been used to lubricate the jackhammer. One of the black boys asked, "Why have the white boys got a clean new bucket and dipper for water, and we've got to drink from this old dirty stuff?" "You damn boys are here to work, not to ask questions. If you don't want to drink, get your asses back to work," the white man exclaimed in a hostile manner. "Well, we don't want no water bad enough to drink out of that bottle," Fullwood, another one of our group, stated. "I don't want no lip out, you niggers. You do what I say or your ass is fired, you understand?" shouted the supervisor. I threw my pick down and climbed out of the quarry. I had had enough. I had not canvassed the others to ascertain their possible reaction. To my surprise, when I looked behind me, they were all climbing out in single file. Cad Roddy, my neighbor and close friend, asked, "What are we going to do now? It's 6 miles to town, and they won't take us back on the truck." I told them we had feet and we were going to walk back to town. Without a single complaint, we filed down the highway. After we had walked about a mile, one of the boys said, "Here come that old white man in the truck." The man pleaded with us to get on the truck and come back to work. He said he would give us a new bucket and a dipper, just like the white boys had. We declined. We went to the courthouse, where the director's office was located. Mrs. Armstrong, a grandmotherly type of old white woman, asked why we were there at that time of day. I gave her a rundown of the situation and informed her that we had quit. She begged us to go back and that she would straighten the situation out. We could see that she was very nervous. We told her we had been promised training, but were only being used as laborers. We told her we would not go back ever. Fullwood's mother was a teacher. She wrote a letter to Washington. Some days later, we were told that the supervisor had been fired. After this incident, all the newly recruited black boys were taught construction skills as they constructed the armory. Summer had come and gone. I was back in high school. As more and more boys donned service uniforms, the war became a part of all of our lives. I had an exact replica of a small radio that I had bought at a novelty store. I asked my young homeroom teacher, Miss Holt, if I could turn my radio on so the class could hear President Roosevelt speak. She answered in the affirmative and asked whether I had the radio with me, and if so, it would be a good lesson for the class to hear the president's speech. I removed the little radio from a bag. The room was solidly silent. Thelma Mitchell, a good-looking girl, was seated in front of me. I passed the radio to her and asked her to turn it on. Thelma fumbled with the dial while everyone anxiously waited for the speech. When she turned the dial, the front of the radio opened up. The facsimile of a huge snake sprang out. Thelma let out a hysterical-sounding shriek as she covered her face with her hands. In a flash, I realized I had overplayed my hand. My male friends laughed. Miss Holt bristled from shock and anger. She commanded me to leave the room immediately and not to return until she sent for me. Chapter 6. National Youth Administration. My mother and my older sister, Jessie, were very upset when I informed them that I had signed up to go to a National Youth Administration Training Center in Rocky Mount, North Carolina. I promised my mother that after I finished training in a trade, I would return and complete high school. My sister told my mother that if I quit school, then I would never finish. My old friend Cad Roddy, Benny Montgomery, and I ended up in the same training center barrack. Cad trained as a welder. Benny and I trained in machine shop. We could not imagine then that mild-mannered Benny would in later years return from the Battle of the Bulge shell shock, and would die in the electric chair for killing his white boss. The NYA was a highly disciplined camp with black boys from all over the state. The NYA camp was situated at the edge of town. The Rocky River ran just a few feet from the back of our barrack. My shop instructor was a good-hearted old white man. He owned a machine shop in Rocky Mount. He taught us in the evening and considered it his contribution to the war effort. He had caught some flack from the local bigots for training us as machinists. He insisted on quality work and constantly drilled us on the fact that we would be among the first of our race to fill such skilled jobs and that we had a duty to our people to do a good job. After training, we were to be assigned jobs at Navy yards that were short of skilled help. On Saturday nights, most of the youth split up into small compatible groups and headed for the juke joints in town. We constituted a great windfall of new kids on the block, and the young wild girls were easy pickings for us. I was pretty much a loner, which had its advantage, until I learned the side that manifested the disadvantage. We were not very popular with the local boys. They resented what they considered our intrusion. It was another Saturday night. We always anxiously looked forward to Saturday night. The boys had shined themselves up for a night on the town. They asked me to come along. I told them I would be on later, after I had finished writing some letters. It was a ruse to split from the herd. I later made my way into town. The dingy little joint called the Cozy Corner was really jumping. As far as I could ascertain, I was the only one from the NYA camp there. The music was loud and hot. The place was filled with the smell of barbecue, hamburgers, and the Saturday night staple, fish. A line of tables stretched across the front near the grill. Beer and wine lined the tables, as jukebox was in the far corner, blasting across the small but crowded dance floor. I had just come in and was standing at the jukebox, looking for an appropriate selection. A short, rather plump girl with an attractive brown face approached me and asked if I could dance. I gave her an affirmative answer and reached for her hand. Her hand bore evidence of hard work. Rocky Mount was a tobacco center, with many warehouses and processing plants. Upon approaching the town, the smell of tobacco was strong enough to give a newcomer a nagging headache. The light over the dance floor were dim. Now the music was a slow drag. As she danced close to me, she asked my name. Hers was Cleo. After the dance, we went to a table where she already had half-finished bottle of beer. I ordered 2 more beers, told her where I was from, and talked about my training. I was fantasizing that I had scored and that the glory of the night was all mine. Cleo leaned forward, bent over, and fumbled with her shoe. She struggled with her shoe for such a long period that I became curious. Suddenly, a tall, rather rough-looking man was standing at the table. His face bore a mark that gave the appearance of a healed-over cut. Perhaps it was a battle scar from some previous encounter. He was armed with a switchblade knife. "Cleo!" he called out in an angry voice. In desperation, instantly my mind computed my options. She sprang to her feet. The tall man swung at her with the long, shiny knife. She stepped backwards, snatched a beer bottle from the next table, threw it, and struck him in the head. My option was to leave in a hurry. When I hit the street, the night was filled with an awful commotion. I could hear the sound of loud voices, breaking glass, and cars being stoned. The boys from the NYA were withdrawing from a Donnybrook and were fighting a rear guard action against the locals. One of our fellows recognized me and shouted, "Man, they're jumping us. You better come on and get your ass out of town." Police cars were rushing to the street. We made a detour to a darkened street and ran the mile to the camp. The fight had only caused some bruised knuckles, blackened eyes, and slight injuries. There was some summary investigation. Shortly thereafter, we were dispersed to the other centers. I was transferred to Elizabeth City State Teachers College to finish my machinist training. The Teachers College was resplendent with young, lonely, and beautiful female students. However, I soon learned that beauty was no substitute for substance of nourishment. The food was so skimpy that in most cases it had to be supplemented by care boxes from home. Too often the breakfast diet consisted of greens, dried apples, tomatoes, and grits or powdered eggs. The entire food situation bordered on a starvation diet. The NYA boys had grown accustomed to an adequate government-supplied diet. The boys bitched and bitched until somebody wrote a letter to Washington. A government-employed white woman came to investigate. She asked one of the boys how often we got milk, eggs, butter, and meat. He looked at her and laughingly asked, "Lady, is all that stuff something you supposed to eat?" "You mean you're not being served these things in your diet?" she asked incredulously. In unison, a number of the boys chimed in, "No, ma'am, we ain't seen nothing like that since we've been here." "Well, I'm here to see that you get a regulation diet that's mandated by the government." "We sure glad to see you, miss, before we starve to death," a voice intoned from the crowd. Results from the ladies' inspection were slow in materializing. Meanwhile, we supplemented the emaciated diet as best we could. On a number of occasions, I wrapped Luden's cough drops in peanut butter for a snack before bedding down for the night. The government finally moved. It was a move that we did not relish. We were given specially designated tables in the dining hall. The NYA youth were fed government-issued food similar to what soldiers would be fed. The college students across the imaginary line could see and smell our food. It was an awkward feeling to eat to one's content before hungry people. In keeping with her religious belief, my mother had always taught her children that it was a sin to eat before hungry people without offering to share with them. It took me quite a while to override my conscience. It was a state college, and I wondered why the state was indifferent and irresponsible toward its obligation to those its duty was to protect and educate. It was a segregated institution, and the racist state of North Carolina grudgingly provided a flagrantly flawed education system. Racism generates contempt and hatred on the part of the victim as well as its perpetrator. Sometimes the boys slipped food from our table to the girls. The only redeeming factor in our narrow little hapless world was the abundance of lovely girls. Once a week, our social life consisted of a school-sponsored dance. As at one of those dances, I met a very pretty girl named Lois Wilkins. It was a relationship that lasted a number of years through correspondence. It was a happy day when graduation time arrived. It was a time of war, and the government needed skilled workers. We were told that all that desired were to be placed in naval shipyards. I opted to find my own employment. My oldest brother, John, had already been drafted and was serving in the Army Field Artillery. My other brother, Edward, whose age was nearer to mine, was employed at a defense plant in Detroit, Michigan. I, too, went to what President Roosevelt had pegged as the arsenal of democracy. The war had created all kinds of opportunity for employment. It was easy to land a job. I became an employee of the Ford Motor Company at its huge Rouge plant. It was a sprawling complex that staggered my imagination. It was said to be the workplace of 80,000 men and women. I was assigned to a boring mill in the rolling mill. At 18, I was the second black person to be assigned to machine production in that plant. The rolling mill was so noisy that one could hardly engage in conversation. The noise even heightened when the long sheets of rolled steel, white with heat, rumbled down the conveyor belt. My shift started in the early afternoon, and we worked long hours into the night. After being in the plant for extended periods of time, when I was able to witness a sunset, the entire world seemed foreign and strange to me. Chapter 7, Mare Island, California, Work Challenge. The Kaiser shipyard was recruiting skilled workers for California on the West Coast. It promised first-class transportation, available housing, and high wages for relocating. I saw Kaiser's office as an exciting opportunity and a chance to travel across the nation. It brought me great joy, having passed the physical and being accepted. I became more excited by the hour in anticipation of a new life and a new world. 2 anxiously hectic weeks passed. I had given notice to Ford and was now released from work. After I waited what felt like a lifetime, the Kaiser recruiter finally summoned me to the state employment office. I responded with joy. That one experiences much too rarely in life. As I confronted the recruiter, he nervously thumbed through some papers on his desk. His face was red and masked with a half frown. He looked up and pronounced, "I'm sorry, your application has been rejected." "Why?" I asked in disbelief as my dreams exploded. "There seems to be some problem that bars you, but you told me with my training I was a sure bet." "I say again, I'm really sorry about the whole thing." "I've got a right to know what happened," I insisted. "Yes, I believe you have a right to know. It is no fault of Kaiser. They are willing to accept you, but the Machinists' Union has a closed shop, and they are refusing to accept Negroes." "What kind of shit is this? A war is going on, and the damn sons of bitches are more interested in beating us down than they are in defeating the enemy?" I exclaimed. "What the hell am I supposed to do?" I asked angrily. He seemed to ponder the situation for a while, then in a somewhat reluctantly cautious voice informed me that a Navy recruiter was soliciting volunteer workers for Pearl Harbor. The Navy man had set up in the same office. He suggested I go over and talk to him. The Navy man was hospitable. The deal was that recruits who signed on would do a stint at the Mare Island Navy Yard for 6 months, with an option thereafter to move on to Pearl Harbor. Volunteer workers would be housed in government dormitories at Vallejo, California. They would be provided with meal tickets until the first pay and would be given a railway Pullman ticket. It sounded better than the Kaiser deal. There was no union at the Navy Yard, and although I belonged to the militant Local 600 at Ford, for the first time I felt a measure of hostility toward organized labor. 20 of us arrived at Vallejo around 9 in the evening. The night was damp and foggy. I had contracted a splitting headache. A community of dormitories were arrayed on a hillside. In front of the office, a lighted sign proclaimed the name to be Hillside Dormitories. The dormitories looked rather Spartan and colorless. We were checked in, assigned small cubicle-type rooms. I spent most of the night unpacking and wondering what my fortune would be. I anticipated that California would be a vastly different world from what I had known. We were transferred by bus to the ferry docks. Vallejo was a strange-looking place. As we rode along the streets, it seemed more of an oriental city than that part of America I had known. The Filipino influence was highly visible in business and culture. We were conveyed to Mare Island Navy Yard on a ferry boat that I considered to be vastly overloaded. After a bout of pushing and jockeying for space and being arrayed like sardines in a can, the little ferry traversed the somewhat rough water and made it to the island. The Navy Yard was an imposing complex. A number of huge warships were in the dry dock, being repaired and refurbished. I had never before seen an ocean-going vessel out of the water. They dwarfed the tradesmen who toiled feverishly from scaffolding along the sides of the mighty ships. There was something about a warship in dry dock that provoked an eerie sense of wonder. Where had it been? Where had it fought? What were its battle scars, and how many of its crew had been buried at sea? There seemed to be a scarcity of black people in Vallejo, which meant that I could not expect too much of a social life. Luckily, In my second week there, I met Forrest DeCoven. He was a short black man who wore a processed hairdo. Forrest was friendly and jovial. He had been in Vallejo some months before I arrived. He knew the city and the places among the Filipinos where blacks were welcomed. We went out for a night on the town. It was a world strange and different to me. The night was chilly and damp. The air carried the smell of seafood being cooked. The jukeboxes blasted up and down the street with American music peculiar to the Oriental and Spanish cultures. This unfamiliar scene gave me a quaint sense of longing. It reminded me that I was a long way from home. Suddenly, I began to realize that Pearl Harbor was even farther. I was beginning to wonder what I had gotten myself into. I was supposed to do a 6-month stint at Mare Island and then on to Pearl Harbor. A war was being fought, and skilled workers were needed at Pearl Harbor. Rumor had it that life was rugged there. I kept remembering that I was experiencing, because of the war, an employment breakthrough that my race had never attained before. Forrest had been a child actor, and at some time had appeared in movies with the actors from Our Gang, the children's television show. He invited me to visit his place of residence. He lived in a modest hotel residence in a not-so-affluent sector of town. Forrest had casually mentioned that he shared a room with his girlfriend. We entered the rundown old stucco building. We walked a long, dingy corridor. Music mingled with the myriad sounds of household noises and loud voices. Cooking odors permeated the entire structure. Forrest fumbled in his pocket for his keys. He said, "This is where I live with my old lady." He held the door slightly ajar and called to the woman inside. "Honey, I am back, and I have a friend with me." The voice from within responded in a tone that seemed irritated. "How could you have the gall to bring somebody to this junked-up place?" "Oh, honey, it's okay. Everything is honky-dory," he intoned. "Hell, it may be all right with you, but I've still got some pride left." I was shocked by the size of the woman. It was even more shocking to see that she was white. She had a good-looking face, framed by long black hair. I suppose that she weighed in the neighborhood of 300 pounds. He introduced her as Pearl. She never warmed up to me. She seemed ill at ease in my presence. I suppose she saw a like attitude in me. Being Southern-born and bred, I had never been in the presence of an interracial couple, and they were a striking example of an incongruous pair to me. I was constantly experiencing severe headaches. After a medical exam, I was informed that I was suffering from an obvious case of sinusitis. I had been in Vallejo a mere 3 months, and the doctor informed me that the climate was averse to my sinus condition. This meant that Pearl Harbor was out of my future. The unknown factor of the East loomed in my life again. I looked forward to seeing my family and friends again. I was homeward bound. Chapter 8. Back to Monroe. Resistance from Black MPs, Military Police. Monroe, North Carolina, was as dusty, hot, and sooty as ever. Being a railroad junction, the black section of the town was always infested with soot. It was a sleepy town that had started to stir faintly. The war was ushering in some radical changes, though race relations remained the same. The railroad was now employing black women to do the heavy, dirty work that had once been reserved for black men. Many of the young men with whom I had grown up were no longer there. They had been drafted into the armed services. An army camp, Camp Sutton, had been constructed in Monroe to bolster the war effort. Because of its strong army engineer and quartermaster training facilities, many black soldiers were stationed there. The ghetto was overrun with black soldiers. The war had drained off local young men, and now many women went wild over the new wave of lovelorn men. Despite the war, and the fact that young black men were being called on to serve their country, racism was still a way of life. It was a situation that engendered mixed emotions. To see military police in uniform, yet with only billy clubs to maintain law and order. White MPs were armed with .45s, while the blacks carried sticks. Whites were authorized to roam and police the entire town. All persons who dared get out of line were fair game for the police action. And they seemed to move with great zeal and dispatch when they saw an opportunity to club a black soldier. There was a restaurant near the Seaboard Railway Station. It was called the New York Cafe, and the owner was commonly referred to as John the Greek. The spacious dining area in the front portion of the building carried a sign near the entrance that read, "For white only." Black people were relegated to a run-down kitchen area at the back door. It was, in essence, a hole in the wall. There were 6 ragged stools at a bar that separated the stoves from black patrons. The place never closed. As a result, soldiers and civilians mingled there most of the time. In wake of a number of fights, the military command assigned black MPs to the area. Whites were giving them such a hard time that they had to be armed. The military notified white citizenry that the post was short of white MPs and that armed blacks were being assigned to the area and that they would be authorized to take whites into custody and hold them until white MPs could reach the scene. This act created great consternation in the white community. It was like the renewal of a Civil War edict. Local blue-collar bigots swore that no nigger would ever enter a white-owned establishment to take one of their race into custody. It was a damp and misty Saturday afternoon when some drunken white soldiers started a vicious brawl in the New York Cafe. A drunken white woman ran out to the sidewalk screaming that the soldiers were fighting inside. 4 black MPs hurried to the front door. John the Greek was standing at the entrance. He stretched his arm to block their passage. In a hostile voice he exclaimed, "You colored boys can't come in here." The big black MP sergeant bristled. "What the hell you mean we can't come in there? We're on duty, and our orders say we can go anywhere soldiers are making trouble." The proprietor angrily motioned them back and further stated, "Niggers can't come in the front door of this establishment." Another bigot came menacingly forward with a baseball bat. He said, "John, maybe we ought to teach these uppity niggers to respect white folks and our Southern way of life." The black MP's lips seemed to tremble, and his face displayed overriding anger. He pulled his .45mm from its holster and pointed it straight at John the Greek's face. John looked stunned and backed away. As the MPs ushered a number of huffing white soldiers to the street, 2 military trucks bearing white MPs and an officer arrived on the scene. The Greek danced from one foot to the other in a show of great emotion. A number of white civilians made a spate of exaggerated charges against the black MPs. The captain was informed that local law required niggers to enter the back door of such places. The white captain was cool and diplomatic. He informed the bigots that they were short of MPs, and until such time that whites were available, they would have to suffer the consequences of military orders. Many blacks stood in view and earshot of the locally unprecedented affair. This dramatic incident gladdened the hearts of the downtrodden blacks. They had never dared to dream that such would occur in their powerless lifetime. Rumor of the confrontation spread through our community like wildfire. It was uplifting to a people who had always been trampled underfoot without recourse. Ours was a meekly conforming people without power or the benefit of law and police power. Frequently, fights were developing among drunken soldiers. There were a number of racial fights in the main sector of town. Although my mother had been glad to see me return from so far away, I could tell that she was suffering some apprehension relative to my being there. The war and the camp had changed the town. I am sure my father concurred with her misgivings. They inquired as to why I didn't go north, where I could utilize my NYA training as a machinist. It was the fate of young black Americans that if they were in quest of halfway decent work and better wages in civilized society, they had to migrate north. Far away, unfamiliar places beckoned me once again. Subconsciously, I was in quest of a dream that had eternally eluded our people.
Katherine, Massey, Book Club, Context of White Supremacy. We will pick up Chapter 9, Off to the Big Apple. Context of White Supremacy. Number to dial if you have thoughts, observations, 720-716-7300. The code 564-943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Before we get to the if you have comments you would like to email, the email untiljustice@gmail.com. untiljustice@gmail.com. Before we get to folks who dialed in, emails, all that good stuff, get some of my notes as well. One of the reasons, in my view, there is no comparison in terms of for victims of white supremacy. Now, if we were classified as white, totally different, 1000% different. But as victims of white supremacy who have very weak noodles, we have very underutilized our brain computers, we sat around and watched a lot of TV, eat bad food, lie about racism. We just do things that do not support maximal development of our brain computers. So, when you read nonfiction in a system that is built around lies and people write nonfiction books and lie like Preston Lauterbach, just with us this past Wednesday, you can check real time. You can be going through, did this happen? Let's verify. Boom, boom, boom. They should be talking about things that actually happened. So he's going through and he mentions his friend, black male Benny Montgomery, and him getting shell-shocked after he went off to fight in World War II. What? Oh, wait a minute. He was shell-shocked and killed a white man after he came back from World War II. Whoa. And got the death penalty. Whoa. Whoa. Let's make sure old Robert F. Williams didn't pull a fast one and just slip something cute, a little cute anecdote in there and trying to, wow, this is just jam-packed that he's got so many anecdotes and what a life from Robert F. Williams. I said, who is this Benny Montgomery dude? I go and check. Now I'm going to start with, I did check with the bot, but the same thing that I always tell you all, not that I think the bot is perfect and never makes errors. The bot told us last time, Michelle Alexander ain't got no white parent. The bot does lie, hallucinate, make errors, however you need to say it, all three. I verify, same way I was talking with the nonfiction, I verify. Whatever the result it says, let's see the data, see if this is supported. Now with this, it should be easy. If this Negro went to the electric chair, man, where's the court case and all that? It was in the newspaper and blah, 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 blah. Benny Montgomery like this shouldn't be no difficult Negro to find. Nope, not difficult at all. but take it away. The actual historical case of Benny Montgomery has been fully located, verified, and documented. The official judicial records and local histories match the exact structural reality Robert F. Williams described in his memoir. To a degree, unless he's going to give us more. Here are the precise, unsaccharine data points and historical receipts regarding the execution of Benny Montgomery. 1. The core event and date of execution. The date of the incident on Saturday morning, June 1, 1946. Wow, they're doing the dates and all that, so see if I can get my head. What is that? Is that 80 years? Just 80 years ago from last month, June. Wow, okay. Benny Montgomery, a 23-year-old black World War II veteran and sharecropper, asked the white landowner boss, William Marvin Mangum, for his earned wages to repair his father's car. Now that's when I read that right there. I said, now, does this sound like someone who was shell-shocked? Mental health issues, went a little berserk? Now, all of those things could be true. He certainly could have PTSD, veteran, all of that. Who knows what he experienced, racism going overseas and all that, Hitler. Totally true. But, dang, you going to cheat me out my money? I'd prefer they just... Yes, he's a veteran, all that. Mangum tried to cheat me out my money. I'm going to fix my dad's car. So I'm trying to be a good son. I'm trying to fix my dad's car. You're going to cheat me out my money. He tried to cheat me out of my money. It continues. The altercation, infuriated by a black male demanding his money, Mangum attacked Montgomery, kicking and slapping him. That sounds like the white, I was going to say that C word. That sounds like the race soldiers that Robert F. has been telling us about for the first few chapters of his memoir. Benny Montgomery, sounding like one of Robert F. Williams' homies, defended himself, pulling a pocket knife and cutting his white boss's throat. My black brother, Benny Montgomery. Benny Montgomery. Talk about black people, slouches. Black brother called in, we started. He said, man, they say black people cowards. And we don't fight, man. We just turn the other cheek and slap, 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 slap. Mangum coming in. I ain't going to give you no money. Tap, 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 tap. Shut up. Tap, tap, tap. We said, okay, Mangum, I ain't going to do it. Okay, I just going to, you ain't got to pay me. It's okay. I don't need no money. Say, that's black people. That's why we need that. Wrong. Benny Montgomery, World War II veteran, say you going to get one slap. You ain't going to get no more. That's what I mean. I said, man, I would much rather have got that for with no criticism to Robert F. Williams. And hey, I might have jumped the gun. Maybe this is in there. But wow, that is way more than just old Ben was a little loony and killed a white. Maximum black self-respect. I had my dad on my mind. I'm trying to look out for my dad. You gonna cheat me out of my money, and you gonna smack me in my. You ain't gonna smack nobody else. Ain't gonna cheat nobody else either. It continues. The legal case, citations, newspaper record, as I thought there should be tons if you got electric chair. I mean, Jesus Christ. You do not have to guess about the legal receipts. The case went all the way to the North Carolina Supreme Court. Supreme Court docket, State v. Montgomery, 227, North Carolina 100, date 1946. The state archives, the physical court transcript, indictment papers, and evidence logs are all preserved under record ID 46F579 at the North Carolina Supreme Court archives. The local newspaper coverage throughout June 1946 framed the incident entirely as a murder robbery. Oh my God. Framed the incident entirely as a murder robbery, claiming that Benny Montgomery stole $84.87 from Mangum's pocket. Are you serious? This standard media smear lie was intentionally manufactured by local journalists to conceal the fact that a decorated black veteran had defended himself against physical white violence over unpaid labor. I might be jumping ahead. At least I'm going to read this now just in case, because Robert F. Williams' life and times is so concentrated and there's so many events. Maybe this is in there, maybe it's not, but I'm going to read it now because I got it. 3. The frontline connection to Robert F. Williams. This specific case is the foundational catalyst for the armed self-defense movement in Monroe. The Klan plot following Montgomery's execution in March 1947. The Ku Klux Klan openly planned to storm the local black funeral parlor, strip the American flag off Montgomery's coffin, and drag his body through the dirt roads of Monroe to terrorize black people. Robert F. Williams refused to allow the desecration. He gathered more than 3 dozen black veterans, armed them with high-caliber World War II surplus rifles, and formed a military perimeter around the funeral home. When the Klan motorcade rolled by to seize the body, they looked directly into the barrels of trained black soldiers and fled the scene. You can read about this in one report. That's why I said check for the receipts, make sure we don't get no slop. One report that talks about all of this. Oh, there we go. The title of the report, I'm going to have to see if I can get the full title of the report. That is goofy as, this is one of those academic journals, so this is published and all of that. It's from a book. I think that's what it is. This is a section from a book. I have to get the book that this is in so that I can share and give the exact source, but this is cited repeatedly. Supreme Court archives, all of that you can check, and maybe we'll have to see, does Robert F. Williams include this story? Even that would be one to think on. His life is so full. If his memoir does not include this incident, wow, what a life. Robert F. Williams and Benny Montgomery. Neutralizing workplace racism. That happens all the time where they're not going to pay you correctly and you got to, is this going to be Mortal Kombat to get the pay for the week? Number again, 720-716-7300. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Let us see. I'm so glad I shared that. Like, I was really excited. I was almost, if I had been like reading by myself, or if this had been a different context, I would have stopped right there as soon as I found that. Like, oh my God, like what the, I was trying to say, really, if there were books on this case and Mr. Montgomery, like if there had been a book on that case solely, that would have been our next read. But unfortunately, there are no books on that case. But I mean, wouldn't you read a book on that? Particularly all the people that say, and you got a cameo from Robert F. Williams. You can talk about his time. What did he do in the Army and overseas? What was that like? What was childhood like in Monroe? Give the full details on this case. Give some of the newspaper articles. It went all the way to the state Supreme Court, the execution. The Klan is going to drag his corpse through the street. Isn't that a book? Dare I say, dramatize it and make it a movie. You put that out for July 4th. 250 years, America. What we do? Grab a black veteran that we going to cheat out his money, get ready to kill him, and we're going to drag his corpse through the street to embarrass and terrorize the other black people. America, 250. Context of white supremacy. Don't know how long that's been going. Let's see. Star 61. Folks have thoughts, observations to share. Hopefully they thought that was informative. Let us see. 5962, if you had commentary, should be with us.
Yes, sir. May I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, they say, let the good times roll, because I'm laughing just to keep from crying. Aren't we all? Aren't we all? I think earlier last week you had asked a question about what do we think may be the cause of Mr. Williams' severe headaches. And so I personally thought that it may have to have do with some of the pipes in that area, considering it's during the Jim Crow era, and maybe lead pipes leaking into the water. But I plugged it into the bot just to see what they thought, and they confirmed that them being in a segregated area may have caused some of that as well, seeing as though that they really don't start changing the pipes over until 1927. But then the bot also said, based on everything you plugged in from chapters 1 and 2, there seems to be enough there coupled with that would cause a headache or 3. You got the white cop dragging black women with a large pistol on his hip. You've got the white superintendent who comes to the school only to yell at the kids and the teachers. You've got the white men roaming into town to have sex with the black women. You've got your attempted family members arguing about whether God is going to be mad at them about alcohol. And then you've got brave the train station and the carts on the tracks to get to school. So the bot seems to think all of that together with lead pipes might cause you to have a headache or 2. From this week, I only noted a few things that I recognized. Early in chapters, I think that's chapter 6, where he's talking about, he starts to recognize that they're not getting the training that they're supposed to be getting to be skilled technicians from the NYA, and just noting the sabotage training and how they weren't just going to tolerate not getting the training that they were supposed to get and walked off the job, having some respect for themselves. And then also from just noting the difference from the chapter where they're talking about the white MPs and the black MPs, and where black MPs can't go to deal with crime or disturbances in white establishments, and it's supposed to come through the back door and all of that. And I did think that that find that you had about, I believe his last name is Montgomery, I did find that constructive as well. And that's all I have.
Much obliged. Like minds, I reckon, because I too was struck by the headaches that Robert F. Williams talked about, and I too popped that into the bot to see, especially when he said he was diagnosed with sinusitis when he went to California, because I'd never heard that before. I'm not a doctor, so that doesn't. And so they said, oh, the climate out here in Vallejo isn't good. And I've been to Vallejo. I've been to California. It's like, I don't remember having no headaches when I lived up there. Like, what? And so I put that in, and the context that's interesting too, because we had quite different context. It seemed like you used a lot more of what you heard from last week and the lead pipes, and I used more of the material that we got from this week. I guess we both did include racism, so we both got that. But what I put in was his commentary about, because he said it so many times, that the Negro part of town, close to the railroad tracks, as you said, they had to brave the railroad tracks to get to school, as opposed to going by where the white people live, racists. But he said that the Negro part of town was covered in soot. I think he even said this week that one of the young ladies he was talking to, that she had like sooty hands from, or it was the tobacco, that was the other one, but they were covered in soot from the railroad, And then the tobacco, the young lady, he did say that her hands even were stained from the tobacco, that she smelled like tobacco because that's where she worked at, and that the whole town would smell like tobacco. And that they said then you could get a headache just from being around all that tobacco. And I said, man, if you're in an environment that is saturated with white terrorism of this level, and then you got railroad soot covering everything, and then you are inundated by tobacco, whether it's the leaves and whatever processing, and then gotta be people smoking it. I mean, so you're inundated. Wouldn't that be enough to cause a headache or three? The bot said from that input, yes, Robert F. Williams' chronic childhood headaches were a direct physical consequence of tobacco industrial soot, and the structural enforcement of racism. You could add the lead pipes too. When you look at the medical symptoms through a lens of racial realism, what the white doctor diagnosed as simple sinusitis was actually the physiological cost of growing up inside a toxic, racially segregated carceral zone. 1. Environmental racism, the soot and railroad loops. Williams notes that his neighborhood, the black part of Monroe, was deliberately positioned right against the railroad tracks, meaning the community was constantly blanketed in thick, toxic industrial soot and coal smoke. The physical damage in the 1930s, locomotives burned low-grade, high-sulfur coal. Constant exposure to this airborne particulate matter causes severe chronic inflammation of the upper respiratory tract, paralyzing the nasal cilia and leading to intractable sinus blockages and pounding headaches. This is textbook environmental racism. White city planners intentionally zoned black populations into the most hazardous, unlivable strips of land directly adjacent to the industrial transport loops, using environmental poisoning as a slow motion tool of population control. 2. The commercial tobacco trap. He explicitly highlights the massive volume of tobacco grown, processed, and smoked in the Piedmont region of North Carolina. Growing up in a localized economy saturated with constant, heavy secondhand tobacco smoke acts as a massive respiratory irritant. It destroys the mucosal lining of the sinuses, triggering chronic allergic rhinitis, chemical sinusitis, and severe localized migraines. The very air he breathed as a child was an industrial byproduct of a southern economy built on the legacy of plantation labor. And then number 3 was the racism, white supremacy that you already mentioned, watching black females being raped and terrorized and abused, race soldiers with a gun on their hip, and blah, 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 blah. The school, everything we've already heard. That all of that would be more than enough to give you a headache, or 3, or 12, or 50. Let's see. And even in North Carolina, they got all them hogs. I'm sure that, now, I don't know if that was such a big thing at that time. Maybe they didn't have the mass production of food in the 1930s, but eventually the hogs would be in there with all the feces, so you'd have lots of things that would contribute to your headaches and lack of health as a black person in North Carolina. Let's see. I'll get a little bit from email number 1 as we proceed. Let's see. Email number 1. Greetings, Gus, listeners, and callers. Chapter 3, growing up to the sounds of Newton. 1. Hobos passed food out. Were some of the hobos white that she passed food out to? Good question. 2. I would think maybe. It would not be the first time that I've heard of white hobos being given food and charity from black people victims of racism. I've heard that before. 2. Miss Sis Polk's house. White lightning. If not made correctly, white lightning can make you literally blind. That is the infamous corn liquor. Chapter 4. The world through the radio. 1. Grandma Pearl, ants crossing God's warning of impending war. Always open to signs from the Creator. Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. Well, that's interesting. When I read that, I thought, here we go with the haints again. Not logic. The ants crossing is the sign. I guess open to interpret. They say some messages are just for you. So maybe the ants crossing, that message was not for Gus T. And it is the same time period. That's what I was thinking. The haints. Here we go again. 2. Jap Anthony. Rupture, big bulge between the legs. Lack of access to health care is long-standing and intentional when it comes to black males in the global system of racism, white supremacy. Lots of reasons you would have a headache. Chapter 5. War fever rises. Laboring bakes place. Battered old bucket of water. We filed down the highway. All the newly hired black boys taught construction, exhibiting a lot of black self-respect at a young age. I do appreciate, I guess this would be another workplace racism, and a key one, that at a very young age, he did not wait and say, well, let me see, is Joey, is he going to leave too? Lamont, you going to leave? What y'all think? I have my own brain computer, United Independent. If they're going to stay, hey, victims guaranteed qualified. Gus T over here said he don't think the answer's a sign. That's on him. I got my own brain computer. I think the answer's a sign, and I'm not going to do no more work. I'm leaving. And I don't care if they can all, whatever, they're going to work, I'm leaving. And he said after I'd made up my mind and I left and I turned, oh, okay, they're not going to work it. Well, that's fine. Well, whatever. I wasn't going to turn around and go back in the pit. United Independent. You are not, we're not a group. We're not attached. Everybody can think for themselves. But bravo for black self-respect. And even once oh, shucks, I was just playing. I'll get y'all. Come on, y'all. We need some niggers. Y'all come on back now. We have made up our mind. We are good. Love it. Love it. And that couldn't have been no fun choice either, to walk 6 miles in North Carolina heat. And I mean, hey, this is walking 6 miles in North Carolina heat where racists might just kill and abuse you for fun. He already said we couldn't walk. He just said we couldn't even walk home from school the easy route. We had to brave the train, so now we got to walk 6 miles. Whew, no easy choices. 2, replica small radio. Thelma let out a shriek. Pranks. Old Dylan Reb should not be a part of our code. In the global system of racism, white supremacy, it can lead to conflict and potential violence. Absolutely. We have heard a lot about pranks. I guess we have read a number of books where we're dealing with children or people in school. So, yeah. 6. National Youth Administration. Benny Montgomery died in an electric chair. Wikipedia states he died by asphyxiation gas chamber. I said electric chair. Gas chamber. Age 23 in 1935. North Carolina added the gas chamber to the electric chair as a means of execution. The white supremacists designed a room in which they could switch between methods in seconds depending on the method chosen. In 1938, the state transitioned to the gas chamber only. I did take a moment to look. It seems that Robert F. Williams' life and times was so full, he did not give any more details about Mr. Montgomery, nor does he apparently even mention, oh yes, me and my other black brothers, we went and got guns and faced down the Klan to keep them from dragging Benny Montgomery's body through the streets. Like, wow, I don't know if that's quite up there with, I am going to say, that is about equal with the great Bill Russell writing a whole memoir, Second Wind, that does not include, oh yes, by the way, we won a championship for the Celtics, and race soldiers in Boston broke into my house and defecated in my bed. We just won the championship. They crapped in my bed. He didn't even include, like, not a shred of it. He included so much more racism, but I said, man, what a life where that doesn't even make it into the book. Wow. And I guess for Robert F. Williams, Man, we faced down race soldiers with guns so many times. Can you really include every moment? What kind of dude is this? Jesus. Continuing. 2. Transfer to Elizabeth City State Teachers College, considered a public HBCU, founded in 1891. Is that named by, I bet you that's named after a white person. I bet you it is. Most recent demographic, 67% black, 17% white, has received $57 million donation from Mackenzie Scott, Jeff Amazon Bezos' ex-wife, largest in school history. And it's a drop in the bucket, as they say, compared to the non-HBCU schools that are not looted by white people. 3. Food was so skimpy, government-issued food that the soldiers were fed. College students could smell the food. Is hunger going to be a theme in another book club? Apparently so. Delectable Negro. 4. Detroit plant President Ford. I'm sorry, what did I get? I'm so sorry. President Roosevelt, sorry. Arsenal of Democracy, Ford Motor Company, rogue plant, 80,000 workers. C.O.W.S guess the book Arsenal of Democracy, A.J. Baim. He was a guest. What was that? That was 2014, because that happened the same time as Michael Brown Jr. I will never forget that. We talked about that book, The Arsenal of Democracy. At the same time, they were so-called rioting in St. Louis, Ferguson, over Michael Brown Jr. I didn't even delay the program. We still talked about it because I thought that was important. He even, in fact, in that book, Arsenal of Democracy, talks about how white women, like thousands of them, same thing he talked about in the book, went on strike. We ain't working with no niggers. Well, wait a minute. The Nazis, and they about it. We ain't working with no niggers. Well, we only going to hire 6 of them, and they just going to... We ain't working with no niggers. Huh? And they get, I said, woo, thousands of white women. This is before 1950. Ain't no cell phone. Ain't no social media. Thousands. Racist man, racist woman. Arsenal of Democracy. Chapter 7, Mare Island, California Work Challenge. 1. Kaiser Machinist. Union is a closed shop. Navy Yard, Pearl Harbor. Our exclusion from unions has been a frequent topic of discussion on the cows, even in workplace racism. 2. Forrest DeCoven, actor. Our gang, woman, white, 300 pounds. Most of the child actors in Our Gang serials, there were at least 4 non-white children, and movies lived tragic lives as adults characterized by murder, drug addiction, poverty, and premature death. Example, Robert Blake, suspected racist who also gained fame as an adult actor in the TV show Beretta 1970s, also stood trial at age 69 for murdering Bonnie Bakley, mother of one of his children. He was acquitted, of course. Chapter 8, back to Monroe, resistance from black MPs. 1. Railroad, black women do heavy-duty work reserved for black men. We are not women or men as far as racist white supremacists are concerned. Facts. 2. Military police in uniform. White MPs, 45s, blacks carried sticks. Heard that before during World War II. Seaboard Railway Station, New York Cafe, John the Greek. Drunken white soldiers, they brawls. New York Cafe, armed black soldiers authorized to take whites into custody. White captain informed the bigots they were short of MPs. They would have to suffer the consequences of military orders. It was uplifting for our people. Ours was a meekly conforming people without power or benefit of law or police. I don't know. Benny Montgomery did not exactly sound meekly. He didn't sound like he had PTSD. He said, "You gonna give me my money." But anyway, interesting section. John the Greek, who may have been an immigrant, may be an example of how they gained their bona fides in white supremacy by dominating black people. The white captain made an isolated decision to prevent total chaos. I am sure after the situation died down, he went right back to mistreating those black soldiers. meekly conforming people, unfortunately, is not a characteristic just of the past. For sure. For sure. I would not say it applies to all of us, though. Dr. Welsing, Dr. Cambon, I could think of some exceptions to the rule, but yes, Robert F. Williams, Mabel Williams. We'll get to, oh, wait a minute, missed one. 3. Mother Suffering Apprehension. Migrate North, C.D. Cowell's book club, The Warmth of Other Suns, the epic story of America's Great Migration. Isabel Wilkerson's one good book, Cowbell. I was actually thinking Essie Mae Washington Williams, dear Senator, that sentiment is so common, especially from the Carolinas. She's in South Carolina, but man, if we could just get to New York, we could just get, they say California too, we just get to New York. Well, I guess he did both. We could just get to New York. Everything would be great. And she was even dreaming, man, if my white mom, if my black mom and my white racist dad, they could just be in New York, everything would be great. They'd go to the Statue of Liberty and go to the art museums. It'd be great. If they could just get to New York. I have no idea why we think that way. Then, now, Eric Garner, the same summer, yes. Let's see. All right, we didn't get to chapter 9. We will return. Let's see. I will nab some of my notes before we get to the second audio segment. Let us see. Did I go to? Okay. Oh, I did. I said, man, did I get too far? Looks like I went past where we went to. Okay, here we go. Chapter 3, where we started off at. Growing up to the sounds of Newtown, and his dad worked on the railroad as well, where they cheated him. I was trying to imagine that happening now. You are a black female, 2026, home alone. You have children. Your care mate is at work or not present, and a band of begging transients knock on your door begging for food. I'm trying to imagine, like, what? At night, too? Like, I don't really want to, but white Jesus said I'm supposed to feed y'all, so, all right, step back. I'll put some food out. Like, what? Like, I think the numbers of people that would do such a thing, that is way low. Like, I might leave a sack of groceries out on the corner, maybe. I'll make a donation up at the food pantry or something, but you coming to my house and me put like, are y'all gonna eat out in front of the house and then leave the litter in front? Let's see. Where he talks about the lack of sewer lines and outhouses constituted a central part of the black homestead. That right there, the lack of infrastructure, where that gets to electricity and running water, all of it even reminded me. I have attempted relatives, so-called, where black people, they collect outhouses, and just that being such a part of our niggardly culture, not a value judgment, just that's been our experience, where you don't get infrastructure. You're going to be the last people to get paved roads. You're going to be the last people to get electricity. You're going to be the last people to get plumbing. Any of you're going to be the last people to get high-speed Wi-Fi. Anything that is constructive, you're going to be the last ones to get it. Now, all the things that are not constructive, we get a new strand of crack cocaine, we'll be right there first. But all the things that are good, oh no, we get new asbestos to dump. Got it. We need a new place for an incinerator, new place for a data center, Niggerville. But that right there, no, we don't have running toilets. So you got to even imagine that. You got to get up and go outside to go to the bathroom. It snows in North Carolina sometimes. Come on. And then how far is the outhouse? I mean, are we talking this right next to the house? It's 20 yards. It's 30 yards. Like, man, come on. Is there a light in the outhouse? Come on. And then we get the juke joint scene at Miss Sis's house, and they're laughing to keep from crying. We've heard this before. And that reminded me of Bill Russell, too, because he has a scene at the juke joint where the same thing. We'll fight for any reason. You tapping your foot to my song? Arr, I got to jump on you. All of that. But, yeah, I'm good on, yeah. Pass on the juke joint as well. I don't need no cone liquor, a.k.a. white lightning. I'm good on all that. You get a good teaspoon of that, and then white people come to attack you or whatever else happens, or you end up talking to someone's female and they pull out the razor and decide they got to cut you. Man, now I don't have my coordination because I done drank too much corn liquor. Come on. Or they didn't make the white lightning correctly and I done went blind. Come on. Let's see. The world through the radio. I remember my father had sent me in quest of change for a $5 bill. I visited 4 stores and many homes in vain. Now, on the one hand, I did think like, now, wow, that is pretty pitiful if people do not have 5 singles. On the other, I thought, dang, the same thing could happen now because we're almost like cashless, like a dollar bill. What? I ain't got no, what? I got the crypto. You want me to get my debit card or I ain't got no, I got my Apple Wallet. I ain't got no single now. I don't do no cash. Like, you have the same problem. Let's see. He said there was very little recreation and entertainment for black people, and respected railroad men didn't dare be caught coming out of a barrel house. Some were very poor readers, and after I'd finished my daily paper route, they often invade on me to read and explain the news to them. I liked the way they praised my smartness. Wow. That's the same thing. I said anything constructive, roads, entertainment, movie theater, Negro's not going to get that. Things that are not constructive for you, oh yeah, we might. Oh, they said we put the vice over where the Negroes go. Leave it there. We'll let you all do a little bit of that. Black people who cannot read. That's been coming up. Oh, we just talked about that with Andrew Bayer last week. Black people who cannot read. Even going to come up later here. We got black students can't get no food, can't get proper training, nothing. You end up with a population of black people. Now you're going to talk about meekly individuals who don't fight back. I'm going to tell you, when you can't read, you have been crippled. You have been race soldiers when they put you in an environment where we're not going to allow you to read. We're not going to have books for you to read. We're not going to let you sit around and read. Let me hear about what happened to my black brothers up in Wilmington. If I'm in North Carolina, that's state history. That's right down. We could ride to Wilmington. Perceivably, I might know some people who grew up in Wilmington. Let me go to the library and read about what happened to my black brothers in Wilmington. Oh, no, you not? Matter of fact, Pitchfork Ben Tillman. Let me read about what old Pitchfork Ben Tillman said right next door in South Carolina, because he came to North Carolina too. Influence spread throughout. Let me read about him and how he's influenced why we don't have no books and literature for the black children of North Carolina. Everything is set up that. So if you have a whole population of males and females, maybe we make it to school after we done got across the train track. Maybe we don't. They already said you got the race soldier who comes and berates all the teachers. You got a whole population of people who are ignorant, don't even know how to read. How are they going to mount an effective sophisticated, effective counter-racist resistance? I got to go get a 12-year-old to read the newspaper for me. Come on. Let's see. He said it was almost a ritual for me to listen to the New York Philharmonic over CBS every Sunday. In the environment I grew up in, it was incongruous for a young black boy to enjoy classical music. I liked all kinds of music, and though seeming strange, I exposed myself to whatever was available. The only part that's strange is the last part to me, is because nothing is supposed to be available to you niggers. Cigarette smoke, corn, liquor, that's about it. Other than that, ain't nothing supposed to be available to you. We were hoping the railroad would take care of you for real. You get squashed and that'd be the end of it. black people, it wouldn't be any such thing as black music. The entire reason that thought exists at all is because we are in a system of white supremacy racism. That, what? You're a black person and you play classical music? What? You're a black person and you listen to The only reason that thought exists is because we are in a system of white supremacy. Period. Let's see. Oh my God, Neely Fuller Jr., are you listening? He said, blacks who migrated to New York, sometimes mostly on holidays or when a relative died, returned on visits back home dressed like millionaires. They drove modern cars as flashy as the white folks did down home. Some even assimilated the New York brogue. They showered the old folks with lavish gifts accompanied by pretentious air that provoked envy and fired the desire of emulation. Neely Fuller Jr., man, I bet you he would have such a big smile if he had read this. He talked like, I watched this happen for years. He put in the show offism. That right there, black culture. Can't impress white people. White people, you can't even read, nigga. I'm not impressed about nothing about you all. So, okay, we go back to the juke joint or go back down south. Literally, he has whole lectures and things where he could have given that exact paragraph. Go back amongst the black people in their little dusty shack and go, and I'm going to show off all the things that I cannot afford, knowing when I go back to New York and get my old niggerish job, I'm doing it about the same. The warmth of other suns. New York, Chicago, L.A., pick one. And she even talked about some, and then they go back so I can show off. They say, boy, you don't know how well we live and we doing. It's so tough up in New York. Yeah. And a lot of that behavior continues to this day. I appreciated his mother's concern throughout the text for her sons. She does not want to see them chewed up in World War II, go overseas and never see them again. A la Emmett Till's father, who was executed overseas during World War II. Let's see. To the columns of ants, as I said, that just reminded me of Bill Russell, the haints, which is about what I would expect from people who cannot read. You got a large population of, say, hey, we ain't made no progress. Can I get one more for the high yellow winch, Ashland, Oregon? Our whole culture is pretend literate, non-literate, semi-literate, illiterate. I would expect this sort of non-logic from my perspective. I'm not going to glorify this as a signal from the creator. Non-logic from people who can't read the newspaper. It would be different if, hey, we have an array of resources of information on how to speculate about what's going to happen and logic, evidence-based speculation about things that are going to happen. If all we got is the ants on the board and we hope the 10-year-old comes by so maybe he can read us the newspaper. Haints. Worthy of great pity. Chapter 5. War fever rises. Rationing books were fast becoming a part of our daily lives. I don't like... What? I'm even trying to process, what does that mean? Could you only check out a number of books at a time? I know about war rations. Yeah, I just never heard that applied to books. I've heard that applied to meat, sugar, gas, those types of staples. I have never heard that applied to books. Or I guess it's rationing books where you log that stuff okay, we can only have this much meat, this much sugar. Because I was thinking they're literally rationing literature, how many books you what? What kind of, what is going on? Let's see. All right. We talked about them going to the Youth Works program and not getting water, National Youth Administration program, and not getting training, and then not getting water, and they get cursed at and all the rest of it. Great show of black self-respect. When he says that they ended up going to talk to Mrs. Armstrong, this grandmotherly type old white woman, who I guess would intervene to solve the, I thought said, hey, I thought we're supposed to be patriarchy and sexist and white men run the world at this time. How is it that Mrs. Armstrong has so much authority to correct things here? Anyway, he said Mrs. Armstrong was a grandmotherly type old white woman. Like, what does that mean exactly? Like, a grandmotherly racist? Let's see. Chapter 6. The great Benny Montgomery. Again, that is even if he didn't have time, which I totally respect, to explain all the details that happened with Benny Montgomery and blah, blah, blah. And then, hey, we had to go defend the Klan again, right there. I would at minimum have appreciated Benny Montgomery was not crazy. Benny Montgomery did not have PTSD. Benny Montgomery wanted his earned income for a hard week or a hard day or whatever the pay period for all the hard labor that he had exerted, and he wanted to fix his father's car. Like, that is, man, that is way different. That is way not the same as he had PTSD or was shell-shocked. Like, it sounds like he might have been a very rational, lucid person who just, give me my money. I'm trying to look out for my dad. Maybe he didn't have a deadbeat dad either. Let's see. And then he said the NYA camp was situated at the edge of town. The Rocky River ran just a few feet from the back of our barrack. My shop instructor was a good-hearted old white man who owned a machine shop in Rocky Mount. He taught us in the evening and considered it his contribution to the war effort. He had caught some flack from the local bigots, that word again, for training us as machinists. He insisted on quality work and constantly drilled us on the fact that we would be among the first of our race to fill such skilled jobs and that we had a duty to our people to do a good job. I have no idea. This is another one. I don't know what a grandmotherly white woman is. I don't know what a good-hearted old white man, what does that mean? He'd have to explain it to me. And he caught flat. You cannot be a white person and be ignorant about racism. The other whites of the Monroe region, they let him know or this is Rocky Mountain region, what are you doing? We don't do no trained niggers. You are breaking the rules as a white man. We're not going to hire no niggers. Well, that's supposed to be, hey, we're supposed to be fighting the war. We don't want no trained niggers. Didn't the white women tell you before? Let's see. Then they're going to get to fighting at the juke joint. When I was reading this and he was talking about the young ladies that he met at the different places and such, I said, man, if I'm Mabel, I'm sitting like, look here, Rob. We don't need to hear how much of a playboy you were as a child. We've been married for a while now. Like, let's, we don't need all the cute girl. And why don't you tell them some more about Benny Montgomery? You don't think that's more important than all the cute girls you tried to holler at before you met the girl of your, like, what? Anyway, let's see. They get to fighting at the club. No parties. Fuller say no parties. He said the delectable Negro, they don't have any food when they go. They're supposed to be getting training and all of this. Blame it on the Depression, racism, white supremacy. He said, we supplemented the emaciating diet as best we could. On a number of occasions, I wrapped Luden's cough drops in peanut butter for a snack before bedding down for the night. What in the delectable Negro. Peanut butter on a cough drop. What? I mean, what? I have had Luden's cough drops, and some of them have way too much sugar. I do know some people who eat those like candy, because I think they do now have non-sugar versions, but especially the older ones, some of those had a lot of sugar in them. But man, I don't think there is no amount of peanut butter that would make me think this is some sort of treat or a snack, like peanut butter on a cough drop. Delectable Negro. That is not quite We Were Once a Family, Harris County, Devontae and his brother eating raw pork chops. Not quite that bad. I would take the peanut butter and the cough drop over raw pork chops, but man, let's see. And he goes to California. I highlighted when they actually explained to him that the machinist shop in California, no, that's what I said. So, hey, you need to migrate. You go to New York, everything will be all right. Hey, if you go to California, everything will be all right. You get to Chicago, everything will be all right. Unless John Burge get your testicles. But everything else, it'll be all right. No, it ain't. Global system of white supremacy. But when he finds out in California, like, oh, no, we don't, it's closed shop. I guess that means it's racist and white supremacy shop. We don't do no niggers. He said, what in the filth, flooring, filth, flooring, filth, flooring, filth, flooring, filth? I said, G-rated? G-rated, Rob? What's going on? Anyway, let's see. He commented, he said that because of World War II, he was able to get training, go to all the California and all these places, opportunities that would not have been available to him if it were not for Adolf Hitler, the Third Reich. Neely Fuller Jr. gave talks about this repeatedly and saying that World War II totally destabilized the system of white supremacy racism, that directly is how you end up with Frantz Fanon and Mahatma Gandhi and Patrice Lumumba and lots of these folks, Jackie Robinson, World War II veteran. Lots of these folks got opportunities and things that happened as a result of things that happened in World War II, and it changed so much. Even moving people, someone like Robert F. Williams, boop, plucking him out of North Carolina, where now he's been to California and all these other places and seen different things and learned different things, where if there had been no World War II, maybe that doesn't happen. Maybe he's just, stuck in North Carolina and can do whatever he does there on a local level. But Fuller talked about this all the time. Then he meets so-called interracial couple. Mr. Fuller emphasized this word should not be used. Black person in a tragic arrangement with a white person. Black person in some sort of sexual arrangement with a white person, but not interracial, suggesting that there's more than one race. There is not. But he says he was shocked by the size of the woman. I can say I was not. He said it was even more shocking to see that she was white. She had a good-looking face framed by long black hair. I suppose that she weighed in the neighborhood of 300 pounds. And this at a time when they didn't have all the ultra-processed foods and Oreo cookies and Lunchables and Snicker bars and all that other crazy. Well, I guess they did have candy and such, but this is a world without McDonald's. This is a world without all the wacky food. You have lots of, fresh baked, fresh made things, and they don't have all those crazy ingredients to preserve shelf life. And that is like, wow. This time period, but say that we've seen this dynamic consistently. A low-valued white person in a system of white supremacy, whatever. You can be down and out, no job, no money, 8,000 pounds, but she's white. And end up with a partner who has like a PhD. That's guess who's coming to dinner? Sidney Poitier. He's a doctor. The white woman she's with, she's just white. Let's see. Oh yeah, we'll get to the second audio installment. I'll save the rest of the notes and such for the second half. Again, I was so taken aback with Benny Montgomery. I mean, the stars of the texts, Mabel, Robert F. for sure, but wow. At least for the first portion, Benny Montgomery, I would have loved an extra paragraph on and Robert F.'s role in you are not going to drag Benny Montgomery's corpse through the street to terrorize other black people. You're going to respect this black veteran. Carry your hind parts down the road, racist Klan members. And apparently they did. Oh, I did get the source for that, as I said I would. Sorry. The section where I read that, or where this is confirmed that this happened. Robert F. Williams defending Benny Montgomery and his execution and all of that. This is in Christopher Parker, who is a black male historian who taught here for years at the University of Washington. His book, Fighting for Democracy, Black Veterans and the Struggle Against White Supremacy. You don't have white supremacy in a title of a book too often, but he talks about that incident in the introduction of his book, Fighting for Democracy. We will get to audio segment number 2, the memoirs of Robert and Mabel Williams, Katherine Massey Book Club, Context of White Supremacy.
Chapter 9, Off to the Big Apple. One hot summer day, I ran into Cad's cousin, Charlie Roddy, a boyhood friend. Charlie was a rambler. He was streetwise. He suggested we go to New York. He had been there before. He had kept out of the draft because he had been classified as 4F. The thought of New York fascinated me. I had heard glorious tales about New York. I kept recalling the song that proclaimed, "I'm going to the Apple to live on Lenox Avenue." A few days hence, I bid my father and mother farewell. They seemed saddened that I was leaving, but relieved that I would be out of the racist cauldron of the South. This was an emotion felt by many black parents who dared think of what white hate could do to their sons in Dixie. In a few days, Charlie and I were off to the Big Apple with just a few dollars between us. We arrived in New York well after midnight and took the subway from the Port Authority up to Harlem. It was the first time I had ridden a subway train. My heart beat with anxious expectation. I thought going to live in Harlem would be like being a child transported to fairyland. About 2 a.m., we ascended from the underground to the surface. My puzzled eyes scanned the bleak buildings and the dirty streets. "When are we going to get to Harlem?" I asked. "You're already in Harlem. This is it, the Big Apple," he smilingly informed me. "What did you expect?" "I just thought it would look different." Still experiencing a sense of despair, we settled into a sparsely equipped hotel with bath and toilet facilities some distance down a barren hallway. This was a sorely disappointing Harlem, but I knew I had to make the most of the Apple. There was no turning back. A few days there, and survival became an adventure. My childhood buddy from our X-32 gang, Cad Roddy, had already settled in New York a month before and lived uptown with his aunt. We visited him in what was a swank Sugar Hill apartment. We convinced Cad to pull up stakes and move downtown with us. We got a room on Lenox Avenue and went in quest of work. Charlie's previous experience resulted in his being employed right away in a hotel. He stood for the rent, and at least we were sheltered. Charlie developed a habit of absenteeism, and sometimes we did not see him for days. He started showing up with wads of money and expensive jewelry. He finally admitted that he had some kind of hustle with some racketeers. Eventually, his absence became complete, and we were still without employment and were now at the mercy of our landlady. She was a kind, motherly type who, after 3 weeks, kindly informed us that she could not carry us any longer. With no money and no jobs, we had to go. I had the address of Dora, a schoolmate and childhood sweetheart who lived in Brooklyn. Into the rain of the night, we went desperately in search of her. After a tiresome, wet quest, we finally located 577 Warren Street, and after what seemed an eternity, Dora finally opened the door. She closely scrutinized us, but without instant recognition. She finally broke into a smile and exclaimed, "Where in the hell did you people come from on a night like this?" She invited us in. "You guys are soaking wet and look like you're living high on the hog." "We got caught in the rain trying to find you," I said shyly. "Trying to run that old down-home jive on me, huh?" she intoned as she mocked us with friendly laughter. "We're doing okay," Kat said in a deceptive voice. "You old buzzards look hungry. When did you eat last?" she asked. "We ate before we came here," Kat stated falsely. "Well, I got a big pot of soup I just made. If you don't want it, I'll have to throw it out," she said. "No, don't waste it. We don't want you to have to throw food away," I declared. We spoke of old times in Monroe, and she warmed the soup. We ate like hungry dogs. Dora agreed to take us in, and once settled, we desperately went in quest of employment. Dora informed us that the B&O Railroad used extras on the waterfront and paid daily wages. 2 days later, we signed up and started work. Life was now somewhat more secure. The work was rugged. It consisted of unloading freight barges towed over to New York from New Jersey by tugboats. It was hard work, but it was a break that came our way just in the nick of time. As 3 days went by, we became accustomed to the toil and sweat of the waterfront. The immediate vicinity where we lived was a tight-knit community. Stella, a tall, brown-skinned woman originally from Georgia, was the nerve center of community gossip. She occupied the first street-level apartment and constantly sat in the window observing the activity of the neighborhood. She was commonly referred to as that big-mouthed Georgia woman. She had an extra-loud voice, and it very seldom fell silent. We often sat on the stoop to catch a cool breeze and to receive Stella's rundown on the latest happenings. Every morning she conducted an exchange of gossip from our stoop to the one across the street. An old woman we came to know as Miss Dukes was her gossip buddy. Miss Dukes constantly proclaimed herself to be a Pentecostal Christian, a denomination I had never heard of before. Aside from her ceaseless gossip, Miss Dukes never missed an opportunity to attempt to convert Kat and me to her religion. On April 12, 1945, I was airing myself on the stoop at 577 Warren. It had started as an ordinary day until Stella burst out of her apartment crying and screaming. Her words were almost unintelligible. She was half choking with severe emotions. "Mother Dukes!" she screamed in a loud, broken voice. "Girl, what in the world is wrong with you? What happened?" "Oh, Lord, they just announced on the radio that the president is dead." "Dead?" "Yeah, dead." "Lord have mercy, you mean President Roosevelt is dead?" "Yeah, it's the God's truth. Turn on your radio." Up and down Warren Street, radio started to loudly blast. The stoops came alive with solemn and weeping people. An old woman stood on the sidewalk crying. She kept remotely repeating, "Lord have mercy. What we poor people gonna do? The only one of the white folks who cared anything about us done gone. A middle-aged black man came down the street. He was visibly disturbed as he shouted, "You niggers' asses gonna catch hell now. Old Lady Roosevelt ain't gonna be in the White House no more." A cloud of sadness seemed to settle over everything. I felt weak and subsequently sat down on the step. There was so much sadness around me that I could no longer restrain my tears. I had never given much thought to the presidency other than the fact of its being enmeshed in Hoover bashing. Because I had been classified as a skilled worker in the defense industry, I had been given an exemption from the military draft. After I left California, I had to change my draft registration to my new address. 3 months after moving to Brooklyn, I was summoned to the draft board. When I arrived there, the center was bustling with activity. The fat white woman who sat at the desk to which I was directed was thumbing through my dossier. She gave me a contemptuous look and instructed me to sit. After a brief period of interrogation in which I attempted to explain that I had left my defense job at Merritt Island for medical reasons, it was more than obvious that the cards were stacked against me. The draft board woman said, in a voice bordering on hostility, "You must know that there is a government edict that all able-bodied men must either work or fight." Somewhat riled, I wanted to match her attitude. "Work or fight? It's all the same to me, lady. I just as soon go to fight as to work." Even though I was displaying an exaggerated bravado attitude, it felt good to proclaim that I really didn't give a damn, one way or the other. Chapter 10. Wartime Army Induction. 2 weeks after my Tough Guy Act at the draft board, I was back in Monroe, depositioning my personal belongings and bidding farewell to my parents. My mother was very upset and full of prayer for me. My oldest brother John was already in the Army 350 Field Artillery Unit deployed to combat in France. I went into military service at the age of 20 in July of 1945. Germany had already surrendered, but attention had shifted toward an invasion of Japan. The feat was expected to be bloody. After being processed at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, I was among a group of all-black recruits designated for training at Camp Crowder, Missouri. 2 railway coaches assigned to us were attached to the rear of 6 rail cars bearing white recruits. We traveled through South Carolina and had a short stopover in Atlanta, Georgia. We were allowed to visit the colored section of the spacious Atlanta station. However, when we arrived at the Birmingham, Alabama station, we could see the white soldiers dismounting and queuing up for donuts and coffee. A Red Cross unit was serving them from a mobile canteen. Somebody yelled, "Free donuts and coffee, boys. We're in luck." The young black men in our newly issued soldiers' uniforms scurried for the doors. A burly white train conductor who stood watch on the platform raised his hands, signaling us to halt. In a gruff southern drawl he asked, "Where in the hell you boys going?" Slaughter, who had been placed in charge of the group, declared we were going to get some donuts and coffee. The conductor scowled. "Not here you ain't. Don't you boys know that it would be an insult for these white ladies to have to serve niggers? You boys just turn around and march right back on that train." A chorus of disgruntled curses rose from the group as we meekly submitted to the outrageous affront. We black soldiers watched forlornly out of the dingy coach windows, thirsty and weary, as the white soldiers observed the disgraceful spectacle approvingly. One of the soldiers, whose white skin afforded him the special privilege of receiving a cup of hot coffee, came to the window of our coach and slowly poured a cup of coffee on the ground. He contemptuously gave out a mocking laugh and drawled, Night fighters ain't gonna be served no coffee in broad open daylight, 'cause it will turn 'em into monkeys. Slaughter retorted, "You goddamn peckerwood, I hope the Japs blow your balls off." Sensing more trouble brewing, the conductor summoned an officer. The officer ordered an end to the bitter exchange and commanded the whites to return to their coach. Our coach was dark now, with only an occasional ray of light flashing in the window as we passed sleeping towns and villages. It was a weary and sleepless night. For as long as I could remember, trains that passed in the night seemed to permeate the stillness of the night with a melancholy refrain. The incident at Birmingham left a bitter imprint on my heart and soul. I thought of the anguish and brutal misery involved in the savage slave trade relative to the ocean passage. Anger was beginning to seize me. I wondered how a so-called civilized nation could do what America had done to us, then force us to go to the other side of the world in a life-and-death conflict, supposedly to save democracy. To add insult to injury, Western democracy cloaked itself in the color of Christianity. I remembered the arguments between my Christian mother and my atheist Uncle Charlie. My mother assured Uncle Charlie that there is a just God who sees everything and will smite the transgressors. Uncle Charlie would always shoot back that if there is a just God, he must be asleep, else he would never tolerate what mean white folks were doing to the niggers. As our coach shimmered down the track, casting a hypnotic spell on all who listened to her sound, in my mind I retorted, "If God is sleeping, for our sake, he had better wake up soon." The following day, we arrived at Camp Crowder. The Birmingham experience still nagged at me in a way that I felt sure would haunt me all the days of my life. The main entrance to Camp Crowder looked good. Flowers lined the well-manicured grass that bordered the long boulevard, which led to the barracks area. It was a good-looking residential billet area for soldiers. The barracks were all white and well-kept two-story structures. It was a good feeling to know that from a military standpoint we were going to be well housed. The buses on which we were being conveyed to our place of billet soon left all of the attractive barracks behind. It seemed that the sun had instantly buried its bright light behind a cloud bank. Bright hope had suddenly turned to dim despair. "What the hell is this?" a loud voice asked. "Hell, this is where you're going to live, better known as Shantytown. This is where darky soldiers billet," the black bus driver informed us. The whole chain of events was indicative of the black man's blighted sojourn in America. There was always some surprising event lurking in the background to add insult to injury. The barracks for the so-called colored soldiers were a shame and disgrace. They were long, single-story structures with outer walls covered with black tar paper. There were no glass window panes, only hinged tar paper flaps that swung outwards. It was more than obvious that these buildings had not been used in quite a while. The interior was layered with heavy dust and reeked of strong, musty odors. We feverishly went to work, and by bedtime and exhaustion, we had transformed the ghastly place to one more acceptable for human habitation. After a few days of processing, our segregated group of young black men was formed into the 29th Battalion. Our commanding officer was British. Occasionally, when he wanted us to exert ourselves more, he would tell us how his fellow officers pulled strings to avoid being assigned to a colored outfit. Lieutenant Cannings took pride in telling us how he volunteered to serve with black troops. He exerted great effort to be accepted as one of the boys. He wanted to learn ghetto slang, and when no other officers were around, he went all out to imbue himself with black culture. The word spook was a code word that blacks often used among ourselves. Sometimes, when Lieutenant Cannings was strolling around the area and met some of our men, instead of saluting, some soldiers would greet him with, "Hi, spook." He would respond in kind, not really knowing that he was being referred to as a Negro. We were being trained as linemen, and the instructors never let us forget that we were in the benefactors of a white man's trade. We were expected to show gratitude. Most of us would have preferred some other training. Chapter 11. Seeds of Confrontation. After basic training, I was assigned to a Signal Corps outfit. The commanding officer was an ex-paratrooper redneck. He wore his cap low over his eyes and had special hard heels on his boots for effect. He screamed and cursed and had a habit of turning beds over when men overslept. He had the outfit cowed down. On Sunday morning, while the white pole climbers relaxed in their barracks, eating goodies from the PX and reading comic books, we were sent out to move and haul the heavy poles that they had left scattered throughout the training area. We experienced additional humiliation when we were forced to collect their garbage and clean their areas. Our executive officer was Jewish. He was on duty on Sunday morning when we were being assembled to police, clean the white work area. He fumbled nervously with the roster and looked rather stark. He gave us a great shock when he told us that he was not advising us what to do, but that we were American soldiers, the same as the whites, and that they should clean up their own mess. His words sparked resistance in us. They loaded us on the trucks as usual. Now we were grumbling for being forced into such a disgraceful and dirty detail on a Sunday morning. By the time the trucks reached the work area, not a single soldier remained aboard. Lieutenant Tillsbury was summoned back to camp. He had us rounded up and flew into a cursing rage. He threatened us with court-martial if we persisted in our work refusal. Sheepishly, we went to the field of shame. There was an old saying that when it rains, it pours. The world I had known had never accepted black people as individuals with human emotions. Unless we were half dead, we were never to be too sick to work, and there was never a stressful situation that injured our lives. I had received a Dear John letter, and the girlfriend I had been engaged to since childhood was going to get married, so her aunt informed me. Civilians were being encouraged to write lonely soldiers. Jules' aunt, who was rather young herself, had struck me at the wrong time with the wrong message. It was years later that I learned that there had been animosity between the two of them. However, the damage was done. Meanwhile, this could be said to have been the straw that broke the camel's back. My attitude changed, and my buddies wanted to know what was wrong with me. To make bad matters worse, I kept my hurtful ordeal private. I felt that I was going to explode. It was Monday morning, and the sound of reveille was loud and clear. Everybody in the barracks was scrambling out of his bunk. That morning I felt the accumulation of a life of powerlessness, emasculation, and dehumanization break the bonds of our eternal submissiveness. I had become an angry human being. This was the moment, no matter how fleeting, that I was going to stand tall. I was going to buck the system, and to hell with the consequences. We were a handicapped and cruelly stunted people. We were no more than a silent shadow, not seriously seen or heard. Everyone was up and ready for duty. I lingered motionless in bed. My buddies became alarmed. They crowded around my bunk and asked if I were sick. When I explained that I was not sick, they seemed puzzled. Fearing for my well-being, they pleaded for me to get up. I could hear the roll call in front of the barrack. It was still dark. Someone answered for me when the sergeant called my name. The sergeant had the men count off. A man was missing. He called the roll again. This time the deceptive voice failed to answer. Now it was known that I was the absentee. I remained motionless, awaiting the confrontation. Sergeant Jackson was a heavy-set black man. He came and stood at the head of my bunker. "Soldier, are you sick?" he inquired. "No," I replied. "Well, what the hell is wrong with you then?" "Sergeant, I just don't feel like getting up this morning. And when I don't feel like getting up, I don't." Sergeant Jackson bellowed, "This is the Army, and no living ass sleeps in this man's army. Get the hell up. I don't want to put you on a report. You know Lieutenant Tillsbury will turn the bed over and kick your ass." Well, he'll get the chance this morning. Sheer terror gripped Sergeant Jackson's face. It was obvious that he had never before been confronted with such a situation, and he was at a loss as to how to defuse such an explosive encounter. His tone of voice receded to more of a plea than a command. In exasperation, he gave up and hurried off to the orderly room. I heard Lieutenant Tillsbury coming. His hobnailed boots gave off a sound like a stormtrooper. Sergeant Jackson and the executive officer came with him. Lieutenant Tillsbury stood at the side of my bunk, looking down into my face. "Are you sick, soldier? Do you need to go on sick call?" "No," I responded. "I know I didn't hear you right. Soldier, you couldn't have said what I think you said, 'cause if I heard you right, I'm just about to kick your ass out of that bed." "Lieutenant, if you kick me, we're going to lock asses and go to hell together this morning. I am as much man as you, and if you don't believe it, try me." He was visibly shaken by the grimness that masked my face. His intimidating brashness faltered. He was embarrassed. His tone and his attitude changed. After standing motionless and silent for a moment, he told me to report to the orderly room after getting up. Later that morning I was confronted by a group of officers headed by the battalion commander, who reasoned with me in a fatherly manner. He explained that if the Army allowed its men to get away with such conduct, there would be no Army. It was absolutely essential that the Army maintain discipline at all times, and inasmuch as other soldiers had witnessed my conduct, they could not afford to let me slide. At my special court-martial, I was sentenced to 3 months in the stockade for insubordination, and was told that I could shorten my time through good behavior. I told the court-martial board that it really did not matter, because I had been in prison all of my life, that having been born black in America, I was born a prisoner. That pronouncement shook them up.
More shaking up to come. We will pick up next Thursday the memoirs of Robert and Mabel Williams. We'll pick up on Chapter 12, Prison Spiral into Tent City. That was People's Campaign, all the tents and such in Washington, D.C. for Dr. King's Poor People's Campaign. Anyway, Katherine Massey Book Club. We will do it again next week. Hopefully constructive learning lots. The number 720-716-7300. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. The email untiljustice@gmail.com. Wrap up our first email. Email number 1, getting the chapter 9 off to the Big Apple. Bleak buildings, dirty streets. You're already in Harlem. Picture of Robert F. Williams in Zoot Suit. That's picture number 2. So if you're just listening, don't have the hard book, shame on you. But they do have a picture of a very young Robert F. Williams in the zoot suit of the times. I'm sure you can Google it or buy it, and they'll give you pictures of what it looks like at that time period. But that's kind of something to see old Robert F. Williams in the zoot suit. Reminds me of the autobiography of Malcolm X. See the Katherine Massey Book Club, circa 2015. Girl, what in the world happened to you? The president is dead. Thinking that suspected racist President Roosevelt was one of those good white people is a part of our confusion. Same for suspected racist President Kennedy. I was so guilty of this for many years. Apparently, lots of us. It reminded me so much of JFK just because although Roosevelt wasn't assassinated, but still, like, man, like, oh, he was such a good white man. And then even the black people, like, you niggers is going to catch it now. And this from another black person, like, so we were good before, and are you going to be safe if they get really aggressive in how they mistreat black people? Since you're black, that's not going to impact you. You'll just be there to laugh and snicker at us. Come on. Chapter 10, Wartime Army Induction, Birmingham, Alabama Station, donuts and coffee. Where the hell you boys going? Barracks for so-called colored soldiers was a shame and a disgrace. After so-called segregation of the troops ended, did the mistreatment of non-white soldiers end? The evidence is overwhelming that it did not. Facts. 2. Lieutenant Cannings took pride in telling us how he volunteered benefactors of the white man trade. Just because people classified as white treat us a little better at times does not mean they are not racist white supremacists. Not all white people are racist? ? Maybe they are all racist. How can they not be in order to maintain a global system of racism, white supremacy? I think even Fuller talked about that. Like, racists, they can be generous, kind, benevolent. It's kind of easy to be all of those things from time to time if you are in a supreme position. You can give out an extra piece of cornbread from time to time, an extra pair of shoes from time to time. It's not that big a deal. You took in everything, so I mean, it's not that big a deal. And it's not like these white people that we've heard, the good-hearted, grandmotherly, we've heard a few of these different white people who are sounding like maybe they're not racist. It's not like, I mean, what did they do? We'll get you niggers some water. If you would like to have niggers to boss around, I guess you don't want them to dehydrate and die. Chapter 11, Seeds of Confrontation. Our executive officer was Jewish, whatever that means. Judaism is a religion, not a race. If they're classified as white, they are suspected racist. 2. Sheer terror gripped Sergeant Jackson's face. It was obvious that he had never before been confronted with such a situation. He was at a loss as to how to diffuse such an explosive encounter. His tone of voice receded to more of a plea than a command. In exasperation, he gave up and hurried out to the orderly room. I heard Lieutenant Tillsbury coming. Lieutenant, if you kick me, we're going to lock asses and go to hell together this morning. I'm as much a man as you, and if you don't believe it, try me. At my special court-martial, I was sentenced to 3 months in the stockade for insubordination and was told that I could shorten my time through good behavior. Interesting illustration of the power dynamic in a system of racism, white supremacy. Even though he was of higher rank than the author, Sergeant Jackson, non-white victim, had to go to the ultimate authority, the white man. Lots of examples of this as well. Even Jackie Robinson, I think he got court-martialed as well. World War II veteran. Lots of examples of this. Black males encountering all sorts of racism in the armed services and said, hey, I'm not going to take this. We signed up, or you drafted us, or whatever. We're supposed to be fighting against racism. Saying that Hitler and the Third Reich and all this, and then you're going to come over here and come on. You got to do better. Let's see. We did not get to chapter 12, so we'll pick back up next week. The email again, untiljustice@gmail.com. The number 720-716-7300. The code 564943 #. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Let's see, our caller 5962. Do you have commentary?
I guess so. Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I too was reminded of the autobiography of Malcolm X, seeing that Zoot suit and thinking about him talking about his time going downtown to do the Lindy Hop. Also, if I'm not mistaken, just like Charlie Roddy, Malcolm X was classified as 4F, not qualified, though through a different tactic, but he was still qualified as 4F. From chapter 10, when he's talking about his time, or he's 2 weeks after the draft and getting ready to leave and bidding his family farewell, made me think of my own time when I joined the Army and having to do so as well. Mine was right the opposite. My father was highly upset to me going off, and I just remember that. Let's see. The part where he's talking about the commanding officer who was British and him, I guess, bragging or trying to connect with the troops that he was. None of his other officer buddies wanted to command that. For him, that also is going to be in what is called an OER bullet, where he's going to be able to separate himself from his other officer peers that, hey, I commanded this group of Negroes, and so I'm different than my other officers. So that's going to be a shiny, what they call bullets for his evaluation report. So maybe not so much him actually trying to befriend them, just set himself apart from his other peers. And then in chapter 11, where he is talking about the executive officer was Jewish and him telling them that he wasn't telling them what to do. The executive officer is generally the next highest commander under the commander. So he definitely had the authority to tell them what to do. So I'm just surprised that this lieutenant is the one who's coming over there and basically telling them they're going to fight if he doesn't do what he's supposed to do. I just found that interesting. As well as I found it interesting that the sergeant, the black sergeant, couldn't get him to do what he wanted him to do either, and kind of lost his authority and also went to go get the ultimate authority. And then the last part where he's talking about at his special court-martial, where he's sentenced to the stockade, and he said he really doesn't matter because he's already in confinement. This is only greater confinement. And that's all I have.
Very true. Unfortunately, system of white supremacy, we are quite confined. The first, what is this? I think we got all the way to chapter 11 this week. So the first 11 chapters and the preface, I think, are a pretty good illustration, evidence of Negro confinement in total, like Negro confinement in Monroe, North Carolina. Like, you can't get no jobs, you can't get no toilets, you can't stop white people from raping you or the people that you care about. Like, total confinement. Let's see. I noted that as well, that Minister Malcolm had the same draft status for World War II, 4F, not supposed to be fit for combat, might be with a little wacky, nutty, we don't want you around here. Talked about that in his autobiography. Let's see. From chapter 9, we says I guess his family, relatives and such in North Carolina, they seem saddened that I was leaving, but relieved that I would be out of the racist cauldron of the South. This was an emotion felt by many black parents who dared think of what white hate could do to their sons in Dixie. In a few days, Charlie and I were off to the Big Apple with just a few dollars between us. Again, can't say enough. I mean, the warmth of other sons, amongst many other texts about racism, white supremacy in New York. Amadou Diallo, Eric Garner. I mean, come on. But the other, I thought, and just us not understanding white supremacy, racism, that there is nowhere to run, Joe Lewis. But they said specifically that there was an emotion felt by many parents who dared to think of what white hate could do to their sons in Dixie. That, to me, again, we're talking about a specific type of racist violence. Yes, he got the rapes, all of that. Got that first. That is not the same as, are they going to kill all these dudes? I don't want to be, well, they did rape black boys too. They did rape black boys too. So it's not like you get excused from that. Rethinking Rufus, I mean, John Burge, that's in Chicago, but that's pretty widespread. So you don't get excused from the sexual violence if you are a black male. Even with that, man, what is this violence, this threat that is going to be focused, targeting specifically black boys, where you might even need to get out of here because they are going to kill you? Remind me of even Kindred, Octavia Butler, where, hey, she wanted to write that book about a black boy as the main character. She could not. She ended up having to switch it to Dana because she said if Dana was Donald, a black dude, we would have a 1-chapter book, Donald is Dead, period. Let's see. He talks about the sparsely equipped hotel and the despair that they had. Again, not understanding the system of white supremacy and thinking, I suspect people had the same feeling getting to Chicago and thinking, wow, it's going to be great. And then you get there and like, what? L.A. would be the, like, whoo. Even now, I suspect you go to L.A. and think, oh, we're going to see Will Smith and all the stars and Kendrick Lamar. And what? and I can't breathe. And that ain't your sinusitis. That's the wildfires from last year and the Boyle Heights fire and the regular climate change and all the can't breathe, and it's a slum, and it's and the racism, and da-da-da. Let's see the picture. They stayed for, I guess, 3 weeks. I said that they only got, and it's very expensive, even lack of affordable housing. They might be in the same situation now, might not even have that much time. If you just got, on fumes financially, probably would have been given the boot sooner, and probably from someone who would not be classified as a motherly landlord, property manager. Probably not. Might have evicted you and tossed your stuff out in the street. Let's see. Use that C word, community. Again, no such thing. Not if you're classified as black. Let's see. They have the death of Roosevelt, as you all already touched on, reminded. I had to wait a few moments because it sounded so similar to many anecdotes that I've heard when JFK was assassinated some 2 decades later. But it sounds very similar, kind of us victims groping for any white person who is not racist, any white person. They just said that he, even when the middle-aged black man, he says he was visibly disturbed and shouted, "You niggers' ass is going to catch hell now. Old lady Roosevelt ain't going to be in the White House no more." When he's saying all of that, like just any white person who, maybe they didn't call us names, maybe they were halfway courteous in public, just, oh my God, this is the greatest white person ever. And I'm just devastated. I got to cry like that. I really thought that they were talking about JFK. That's Man, and I can't even really think, I guess I'd say Bill Clinton, but I don't think Bill Clinton has that same sort of connection with black people. Certainly not after Super Predator and all of that. Like, I don't even think they've had another black person with that sort of connection, white president with that sort of connection with black people, where large numbers of black people just like, oh, that is a great white man. He is not racist and has done so much for black people. And oh, we're going to be so sad to see. Like, I can't even think of anybody since Kennedy, really. Like, I don't think any, Jimmy Carter, I don't think has that quite same, like I said, certainly not Bill Clinton. Let's see. He meets another fat white woman, suspected racist. I don't know if this is fat shaming white women specifically, but early pattern in Robert F. Williams' memoir, his portion of it. The chapter 10, his wartime army induction. He mentions being processed at Fort Bragg. I think that's the base where they've had all the controversy where it's gone back and forth, and Fort Justice and all this, and we're not going to name it after no suspected racists and all that. And then President Trump got in the White House and said, we're changing it back. We're not doing that wokeness and Fort Bragg, 2G. So they changed it back. Let's see. I had forgot to mention the first time they were talking about World War II and going to Japan where they're going to drop the nuclear bombs. We are just past the so-called anniversary of the testing for the nuclear bombs, which is certainly directly connected to World War II, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, but they just have had lots of reports over the past few days or so talking about the anniversary of that test, an important moment in world history of white supremacy. Let's see. They're on the troops are migrating here on their trip and then on the train, and oh my goodness, Eureka, it's our lucky day. Coffee and donuts. And I mean, this is back at a time where you didn't have a Starbucks on every corner. You didn't have a Starbucks at every train stop. You didn't have didn't have a Starbucks on the train probably, and although you just didn't have all that stuff. I guess you did have some food cars on the train, but it was way different. At that time, it would have been, oh my God, we haven't eaten in forever, and we get a hot cup of coffee and a snack, some donuts, ooh. And whoa. You're not, white women not giving you no donut. Get back, that's for the white women. And then he said, one of the white soldiers, those with white skin. Now, I will point out, white people do not have white skin. That is a lie. They are classified as white. You can say pale skin, no problem. Melanin deficient skin, no problem. But they do not have white skin. You can grab any white person you like. You can get a regular container or glass of milk. Put that glass of milk up next to the white person. You're not going to have anybody whose skin is the same complexion as that glass of white milk. That said, he said, or wrote, one of the soldiers whose skin was white, so-called, afforded him the special privilege of receiving a cup of hot coffee, came to the window of our coach and slowly poured a cup of coffee on the ground. He contemptuously gave out a mocking laugh and drawled, "Night fighters ain't gonna be served no coffee in broad open daylight, 'cause it will turn them into monkeys." All these years, and we're in the middle of World War II. That's you sounding like Adolf. Monkeys. Here we go. The President Obama. Monkeys. monkeys. Anyway, composure. This one, not to go wild, not to get angry about not getting the coffee and donuts, and then not to get angry about you see the provocation. I don't even want no coffee to drink. I just want to mock you niggers. I don't need no pick me up. Now, again, this is a time where, hey, who knows when we're going to get another, snack or pick me up. I don't even care about that. I'm just going to waste it. Just mock you niggers. Thought you was going to get some coffee, didn't you? Thought you was going to get a donut, didn't you? Sit on there and don't get nothing and like it. See? Love that sort of thing. Just to mock. Now I feel a little bit better. I feel even better, really, if I had drank the coffee. What does it mean to be classified as white? The retort, after they go through all that, he said, Slaughter retorted, "You G.D. Peckerwood, I hope the Japs blow your balls off." Like, whoa, filth. And Welsing, a moment. Didn't Haggeseth, he said he's going to start checking the troops this week for their testosterone levels. That's going to be a quick check. You blowing people's testicles off. What's wrong with you? Sounding all lynching, chopping gentleman John Burge, ripping people's testicles off. Ought to be shamed. Let's see. He says, to add insult to injury, Western democracy cloaked itself in the color of Christianity. No such thing as Western democracy. We have a system of white supremacy. Western, what does that mean? That's often used as a synonym for white. Why don't you just say that? As opposed to warrior, or sometimes they act like they don't want to say that, or then they'll come back and the Western democracy. What does that mean? What does that mean? Eastern democracy? Southern democracy? White people. Say what you mean. That's what you're talking about. White people cloak themselves in Christian. We don't have no system of racism, white supremacy. We good Christians. The religion of white supremacy. And then the troops, they're taking to shanty. So we don't get no donuts. We don't get no coffee. What the hell is this? Where you going to live? Better known as Shanty Town. This is where the darky soldiers billet. They get the black bus driver to inform them. Total system. I keep saying, doesn't matter. New York, California, South Carolina. Total system of white supremacy racism. And we didn't, I think for the most part, didn't grasp that at the time. And then we still don't understand that now. Still learning. I think we'll let it ride for next week. Basically got everything. I might have missed the last chapter in the first audio segment, but I told you the freaking Benny Montgomery, I was so stunned. I didn't know that was going to pop up in the middle of the memoir. Again, that's one of the big reasons why I enjoy reading nonfiction, because you can learn so much. It's verified. You should be able to go to the records and track these people down or learn more information about what they're talking about. Benny Montgomery and people that are in North Carolina, you should be able to check the newspapers. And if anything, I would see if you can find some of the black newspapers. That's one thing I'm going to do between now and next week. See if you can find some of the black newspapers that give more of an accurate accounting of what took place in terms of him trying to get his money back, this white man having slapped him initially and all of that. If you can find some of those newspapers from 1946, 1947, or later, if they're talking about the case afterwards, that would be awesome. Should be easily available to you if you're in the North Carolina region, even South Carolina region. Easily available to you if you maybe have grandparents or such who are of a certain age. They may remember this case. That's it. Creator. Remind us, sobriety would be best under conditions of white supremacy. We need high-functioning brain computers. We do not need to be at the club, knife blade in hand, ready to cut another victim of white supremacy. We need high-thinking minds to permanently put racist man, racist woman, racist child out of business. It has been time. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. Remind us, stop saying not all white people are racist. Even the good-hearted, kindly white people, even them. Remind us, stop name-calling black people, stop name-calling and cursing black people, the people most to blame, classified as white, and stop showing off to other black people, victims of white supremacy. It does not earn you anything, does not solve our problem, replacing white supremacy with justice. No showing off. Cal signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.
Nigga, you so brainwashed.
I'm a victim, brother.
Problem. You're a victim.
I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning.
Shut up.
The man has programmed my conditioning. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.